Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukee Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of the staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov. You may locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you have not reviewed the agenda, please do. It contains important information about our process. If you wish to be included in the mailing list for decisions, or if you wish to provide public comment, please send an email to planning@milwaukeeoregon.gov. I will read into the record written comments received during the meeting. Written comments should be concise. Each reading will be limited to 3 minutes to include in the meeting record. Public comments must be received before the end of the applicable portion of the meeting. The meeting will follow the basic formats listed on the back of the agenda. It includes all hearing procedure steps. We may vary from the process based on specific circumstance. Next on our agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from May 25th, 2021. Does anyone have corrections to make? I am looking at videos. I'm not seeing anyone raising hand. I do have one correction. Page 2, Chair Losfeld added it was common for structural engineer to design and designate a building as seismic. It should read designate as a seismic category specific to location and occupancy.
Got it.
Anybody else have any comments or suggestion or there's edits? Okay, I'm seeing nobody. So I will then entertain a motion to approve the notes as amended.
I would like to make a motion to, are we doing both at the same time?
We're doing May 11th. Let's start with May 11th.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the May 11th, 2021 minutes as amended.
Second.
And we have a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No? Nay? Okay, all are in favor. Let's move on then to the approval of minutes for May 25th. Does anyone have any corrections to note for these meeting minutes? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the notes as presented.
So moved.
Have a motion to approve. All those, or can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay. All right, all are in favor. So we will have both approved. I'll move on then. Informational items from staff.
No, not at this time.
Okay, moving on. This is an opportunity for audience participation to comment on items that are not in tonight's agenda. Does anyone wish to comment on an item that is not on the agenda? Mary, do we have any audience members in attendance? It looks like we have several. So this is the opportunity. Please use the raise your hand feature of Zoom to indicate if you would like to make a comment at this time.
Not seeing any raised hands at the moment from the attendee list.
Okay, then I will move on if no one indicates otherwise. So we'll just move on to the public hearing. The next agenda item is a public hearing regarding a sign code zoning text amendment. The public hearing on ZA-2021-003 is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to consider legislative amendments to the sign code. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation to council regarding whether the proposal conforms with all cities' applicable criteria. I now ask staff to cite the zoning ordinance section or sections where criteria can be found.
Milwaukee Municipal Code 14.08.090.
Thank you. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest? Please raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised, does any member of the Planning Commission wish to abstain? Seeing no hand raised, let's proceed to the staff report presentation.
And I was just going to say a few words. The reason that this is before you all tonight is because there's a couple of meetings ago when the high school came to the Planning Commission and wanted to get an electronic sign approved. And there was general support from the Planning Commission to do that, but our code just wouldn't let them do that. So it was denied. And so the applicant appealed to the city council. So we had a conversation internally and kind of got direction from our city manager to look at our code and see if we could do a very specific fix to shepherd the high school through this process and have another conversation to see if we could get their sign approved. And it was just a surgical fix to fix the sign code to allow that to happen. We understand that there are some other issues that we need to still probably work through with our sign code, and I don't think this addresses exactly what everyone on the commission was trying to get at, but due to kind of the limitations with staff and time and budget, we can't really open the whole sign code right now. So this was just a really surgical specific fix, and so that's why we're here tonight. And with that, I guess I can hand it off to Mary.
Let me go ahead and figure out how to share my screen here. Okay. Okay, so Mary Heverling, Assistant Planner with the City of Milwaukee, here to talk about the code amendments for specific sections of the Title 14 site code. The proposed amendments you have before you that was in the packet is, like Laura said, to provide a process for a public high school existing as an approved community service use, the CSU, to apply for an electronic display sign. That process would be a type 3 process. It does have size limits on how big the electronic sign can be. It only allows one per CSU, and the sign itself has to meet standards that are already in our sign code for electronic signs. And in fact, I took the same standards that apply to areas in the downtown mixed use zone, which, if you remember, the high school is just literally right next to downtown. And so those standards would have to be met that are similar to what is allowed in the downtown mixed use zone. So that includes the type of sign, how many, like if it's flashing, and kind of the brightness of it as well. So there are certain things that we kind of try to tailor to make it so that it fit, whereas if a CSU is in a residential area like the high school is, so that it meets the intent and therefore it still provides public notice and public process for somebody to ask for, go through the process for an electronic display sign. The size limit, like I said, is actually the maximum size you can do for an electronic sign is the same. It would actually, if you decided not to do an electronic sign for a CSU, it would still put you in a type 3 process, just because a CSU maximum sign is 16 square feet. And if you go above that, then you're automatically in a type 3 process. With this code amendment, these draft amendments, we'd allow you to go up to 20 square feet with an electronic display sign. And so therefore, it already bumps you into type 3 process as well. So it sort of just follows the same process you would have to do if you wanted to do a non-electronic sign that big as well. So that's one of the reasons too why it's in that type 3 process. Again, it's pretty prescriptive. It's just this one section of the sign code that's being changed. Language is added, but nothing has been taken out. So in terms of staff, we recommend obviously approval for the proposed amendments per the ordinance and findings. And then you all will provide a recommendation to City Council, who will end up making the final decision on this code amendment. In terms of what you as Planning Commission have, you do have 4 options. You can recommend approval subject to the recommended ordinances and findings, or you can recommend approval with modified ordinance and findings. And then obviously the modifications will need to be read into the record. You can recommend denial, or you can continue the hearing. So it was quick and simple, hopefully. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, or if you have any other comments as well, and I will figure out how to stop share.
Are there any clarifying questions for staff? Commissioner Edge?
Yes. So this is limited to public high schools in the city. Is there something about high school and the ability to put a sign on a high school that strongly connects this policy, with the regulation?
You mean what makes the difference between a public high school needing an electronic sign versus other schools?
Yeah, like maybe the Clackamas Community College Harmony campus, or an elementary school, or an alternative high school, maybe a private.
Mm-hmm. There is nothing that in this code update that defines that more prescriptively, if that makes sense. It just basically says public high school. But if you have any ideas of how to make that a little bit more general, that would make sense. So then we're kind of making sure that it's still covering what we need to cover, but it's not as like public high school written language. Happy to hear those suggestions as well.
Yeah, so I guess my next question, it kind of leads into my next question. Just as an example, we're working with public high schools, with the regulation. So if, say, the North Clackamas School District relocated its new urban high school, which is an alternative school, but is still a public high school with about, 140 some students into the city, they would be allowed under this code to put up an electronic sign. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, but it strikes me with our experience talking about this before that there was really one of the motivators for putting the sign up for the school is the number of the student body that they're trying to communicate, that they, would benefit from being able to see communications on the exterior of the building. And so I'm wondering if it might make sense to, rather than tether the regulation to a high school, a public high school, that maybe it makes better sense to tether the regulation to an educational facility that has a student body in excess of some threshold, like say 500 students.
Okay.
Am I misreading? Kind of the background here. I know there were other reasons why we were talking about that sign in the previous application, but really it struck me that it was connected with the number of students that could benefit from such a communication mechanism.
Yeah.
So,
I think that does capture kind of the intent of their reasoning for why they needed the sign versus just being considered a public high school. So I follow that logic.
And is it contradictory? I guess it feels more to me like that's the intent rather than saying any public high school, like a public high school with a really, like a smaller student body, that wouldn't be so many students benefiting from that could still come in and benefit from this regulation as it's written. So that's where my concern is. So thank you.
Are there other commissioners who'd like to make comment? Commissioner Humer?
So why did we choose the words public high school instead of category 4 building?
Because there is an actual code definition in our code that defines public high school. We do not have a definition for category 4, and therefore we wouldn't know what then would be allowed to have this, be able to use this code, because we don't have any designation in the city to be able to know. And from what we learned, there isn't actually a list of what is category 4 buildings in the city anyway. So it would be confusing to add something that we don't have definitive answers that we know specific buildings would meet this criteria. They don't have to apply to the city to be category 4, if that makes sense. So we may not even know if a category 4 building comes into the city unless they tell us or we somehow find out. Yeah.
Sorry, but isn't that part of like the permit information that's provided to you by a structural engineer by any projects that's permitted, is to understand what category the building is prescribed?
It may be for building code, but for planning, we're not reviewing for that.
It seems odd to me to designate this based on students, the number of students. When the specific conversation with the commission was related to that category, was related to backup generator capacity, and we've lost that in this language, both of those items. So again, I'm just voicing my concern that this is not an ideal code path for making these types of revisions specific to one type of building, specific to one building, in fact. Are there other comments, yes, commissioners? Commissioner Sherman?
Thanks. I think I just had a kind of a clarifying question in terms of in the code as drafted, would a two-sided sign under the square footage threshold be allowed? Or are we talking just about kind of one-sided electronic sign?
That's a really good question. I believe it's just one side. So the total would have to be the maximum size. So if they wanted to split it and say the total is 20 square feet, to be 10 feet on one side and 10 feet on the other, but in total, it has to be 20 square feet.
Yeah, as written, it wasn't clear if a two-sided
Yes.
sign under that threshold could be allowed.
Yes.
So I don't know if that would be something to clarify, or if we think it's clear enough there.
That's a good question. So we'll look at making that more clear.
Commissioner Ert, did you have your hand up?
No, I think everybody's kind of covered everything pretty well.
Others? Okay. Oh, Commissioner Kosh-Robati?
Yeah, can you again clarify why we didn't go the category 4 up? I know you just did, but I'm just trying to, if I'm not mistaken, you said it's because we don't have a definition in the code currently of what that is. Is that what it?
Yeah, we don't have a definition, nor do we know what buildings in the city that currently exist would be considered category 4. We just happen to know that for the high school because they told us, but it's not a requirement within the city for somebody to tell us if they're category 4. It's just how they build it, basically. So we don't have a way to be able to know when a building is category 4, and therefore it's harder for us to write code language for something that we don't have a definition for in our code right now. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, that's definitely helpful. But is it possible to get the definition from the ones who designated it a category 4 and base that off of their definition?
We can look at what the definition is. I think it's building code related. So we'd have to look at what the definition in the building code is. But from my understanding is the category 4 was not on the table for buildings that were going to be allowed for electronics. And I think Laura can maybe check it out.
Commissioner?
So I want to make sure that there are two parts to this, right? It needs, the way that it's currently written is that the building needs to be a public high school and it needs to be in a CSU zone, right? And those are the two major factors, basically, right?
Yep.
I'm just trying to figure out, so category 4 buildings, as we learned, are generally new built schools, probably government buildings, and hospitals, typically. And so are hospitals generally in the CSU, zoned as a CSU, and are government buildings zoned as a CSU?
That is correct. Yes, both would fall under that CSU category.
Okay, thank you.
Therefore, I think the idea of not using the category 4 is due to the city not being quite ready to open up allowing electronic signs to government buildings and to hospitals and other uses in the CSU. And we need to spend more time analyzing that before we wanted to move in that direction. So that's why we're very specific with this particular code recommendation.
Commissioner Kashrabadi?
So for the sake of getting the high school who's waited, 15 years to get this signed, we could pass this and then we can amend it if we want to dive deeper into it, correct? We can always go back to define it better, I guess I should say. Is that correct?
We could go back at some point in time when we had the capacity and dig into the sign code. Yes, I can't guarantee that that's going to happen anytime soon, but that is the possibility in the future.
Thank you. I see the point why you guys made that specific.
Commissioner Ernst, was that a raised hand?
I have been using the button this time. I just was going to echo kind of the comments. It sounds like, just the clarification, is it allowed in the code now for the double-sided sign? And secondly, it makes sense to me from all of the conversation, just having it be public high schools versus kind of opening it to everybody right now. So that makes sense. But I just did want some clarification. Is it 2 sides that's the electronic reader board, or just one?
Well, you could make it 2-sided, but the total size that the sign would have to be 20 square feet. So it could be 10 feet on one side and 10 feet on another square feet, or one side could just be 20 square feet. But I think with what Commissioner Sherman said, I think I'm going to make the language more clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got Commissioner Massey and Commissioner Sherman both with their hands up.
Do they?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't see that. For some reason, I can't see that. So you might have to do this tonight. Commissioner Massey, go ahead.
Well, first of all, let me thank the staff for jumping through a lot of hoops to come up with a code change to get approved what I think most of us believe is a good thing for the community and that kind of thing. I'm a bit surprised that we had to jump through these hoops and to go this route, but I can certainly support this as an expedient move. And hopefully if we get the capacity, then we can revisit this topic at a later date and make it a little bit more specific and a bit more general. But I just wanted to tell the staff, appreciate them going to these links to try to help out our education partners.
Thank you. Anybody else have their hand raised that I cannot tell? Commissioner Sherman?
Thank you, Chair Losfeld. I think I just wanted to return maybe momentarily to Vice Chair Edge's kind of questions and maybe comment around, is there a size threshold that we might want to think about in terms of a number of enrolled students? And just thinking about public high school could also include a charter school that I could probably go charter with a handful of paperwork tomorrow and then become a public high school in the city of Milwaukee. Maybe it would take a month or so. But is that maybe as an extreme example, the type of situation that we would want to be allowing here? Or do we want to think about some level of community use or community benefit that crosses over a threshold? So Vice Chair Edge had suggested, maybe 500, which maybe I'm thinking about my daughter's elementary school probably wouldn't qualify. So maybe we'd want a little bit lower, 250 or something like that. But I just wanted to kind of return to that and pose that question for the commission.
Do any commissioners have comment about adding in specific language about capacity of the high school itself?
Chair Roosevelt, I would caution you about entering into deliberations before we continue with the process. This is supposed to be questions for staff, I believe. Public comment, and then maybe we can hash that out a little bit later if I remember my.
So are there other questions or comments for staff? All right. So this is the testimony portion. Have we received any correspondence on this matter other than those included in the packet, of which there are none?
No.
No, thank you, Mary. Are there any individuals within attendance tonight that would like to be recognized for public testimony? Give you a second to raise your hand. Seeing anything, Mary?
I'm not seeing any raised hands at the moment. I'm not sure what the protocol is. We have 3 people who've called in. I'm not sure how they indicate whether or not they want to.
We may just want to allow them to talk and double check to know what they're here for and if they're going to provide testimony for this one or the next hearing.
Okay, so I see 3 phone numbers. Should I just read the phone number and ask if they want to say anything? So 503-516-4664. Did you want to offer any testimony on this issue? How about 503-975-2250?
Maybe Brett, just the last 4 digits.
Okay, sorry. All right. Last 4 digits, thank you. Last 4 digits, 8780.
Okay.
If I may very quickly interject, for future reference, phone attendees can press *9 to raise their hand in Zoom. And so we can advise attendees to press *9 if they would like to raise their hand.
Good to know.
It looks like, something to add to the text. That would be great. So it looks like then we can skip past the testimony in support or opposed or neutral and skip any questions regarding that and rebuttal. And so we'll just go to the closing of the public hearing. The public testimony portion of this hearing, ZA-2021-003, is now closed. Are commissioners ready to discuss? I believe you are. Who'd like to lead off? If you're raising your hand for some reason tonight, I can't see any raised hands, so you just have to physically, old-fashioned, raise your hand. There we go. Commissioner Hemer, what would you like to say?
So to quote a song, torn between 2 lovers, being felt like a fool. So I do have major issues with making rules for one in particular person, which this case is. I also have the same sentiment as Commissioner Massey that I can't believe that we had to do this. So if it makes the commission feel better, to raise a number to 500 or 750 students. I would be willing to go for that. I don't necessarily see it as necessary. I would much rather see this as a category 4 with a workable generator when the power is out. But that seems to prove to be a little difficult at this moment to be able to get this ordinance through. So that is what I would like to see it strive for. But for the meantime, this fix is needed not only so that the students can be able to communicate, but they can communicate to the public during a disaster. And also because this is really an inclusionary message board to be able to allow students that may not be represented and not be able to speak our language to be able to obtain those messages. So it has a huge amount of value beyond what we're trying to do. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamer. Does anybody want to follow Commissioner Edge? You've gone off mute. Do you have go ahead.
Yeah, so I appreciate staff bringing forward these targeted changes. I understand the challenges that you faced with the direction from council, and I appreciate the effort that you put into this. Certainly our recommendations I don't think reflect at all on how we feel about the amount of effort that you put into this. So I know we're having some debate about it, but I appreciate what you've put into this. What I'm looking for really is what's the public policy, objective here, and what's the intersection with the regulation with the public policy objective. And I agree, it was the category 4 building. That's what we were all really thinking in the prior application, but that's not what's before us today. And so I don't know that we really get to take that into much consideration because it's not a matter that's before us. There is no definition for that. It would be a little challenging to work that in. So anyway, absent the category 4 building, which I would support a new definition for that and tethering this regulation to that policy. We're looking at a regulation that's allowing policy for public high schools to communicate. And really what I think the core of that public policy is, when we're looking at a school doing it and not specifically a category 4 building, disaster ready building doing it, is the ability of the school to communicate with their student body. And because we don't, apparently, again, this is very targeted towards high schools, from the direction from council. And so it strikes me that we're not really looking at allowing this kind of communication to occur on just any public school or any educational institution anywhere. We're really looking for it to provide an amount of value to the community that's there. And so, what's the public policy objective? Well, I think it's, to be able to communicate broadly to a large number of students. And that's really the intersection here with the regulation that we're trying to introduce. And so my recommendation, I am prepared to approve this as presented to us, but I would like for us to recommend to City Council that they really consider what the public policy objective is and how this regulation implements that, and suggest that they consider things such as the number of student body enrollment in the drafting the final ordinance language. And ultimately, council is going to approve what they want to approve, but that would be more in line with my comfort level in terms of what this regulation is trying to accomplish and how it's going about doing it. Because I really don't believe the intent here is to allow literally anything that could qualify as a public high school, no matter the student body enrollment, no matter the public benefit for them having an electronic sign, to come in and put up an electronic sign. I don't think that's the intent here, but that's what we're preparing to allow. And so that's why I would like our recommendation to council, to City Council, to include some language around what really the public policy objective here is. And we're trying to limit the amount of signs, okay. but is this really doing it the right way? And is this really achieving that public policy objective? I don't think this language does, but I'm still prepared to approve it or to recommend approval of it, hopefully with that additional recommendation.
Okay, others? I'm seeing no physical hands raised. So, I think we should, maybe take a temperature read here about commissioners, maybe just before we take a vote to see if we're all leaning in the same direction here. Are there any commissioners who at the moment are feeling as though they would not support the recommendation in front of us? You'd have to physically raise your hand for me to know. Okay, so I'm thinking, Commissioner Edge, would you succinctly, clearly communicate maybe some proposed language you might include so that we could then you could then put forward a motion with recommendations?
Succinctly, the regulations should consider the public policy benefit of the number of students that could benefit from this communication. So we should look at having a minimum threshold of student body enrollment as the mechanism for when this is allowed.
Okay, I think that's it. I think that recommending a minimum threshold for student enrollment of which to trigger. Commissioner Erd?
I just want to add my 2 cents on that. I feel like if Milwaukee High School, somebody used New Urban as an example, and I know that I don't think that they're in the boundaries anyways. However, I feel like New Urban probably should be included in this. So if we were doing a minimum, I think like 100 would be, I would lower it from 500 because in New Urban specific case, they do have a lot of students, and that school would likely grow, and they have a very diverse population. So having that reader board that does change languages and has that capability, is kind of in there too. And I understand that that's not specific, but that's just using that as an example. So I also understand, like, if somebody was going to open a charter school with 5 students, that just to get a reader board or something to work around the system. But I don't, also, it's not really a problem until it's a problem, and somebody that would go that far, it's just, we could imagine all sorts of scenarios. So I don't see this as a problem. I would just say, if we're going to put a threshold on the number of students, I would, if a school like New Urban was in Milwaukee city boundaries, then I would think that they should be able to. And New Urban has 140 or 200 and something students, and I think that that school should be able to. So if you're going to put a number on it, I would actually lower the threshold.
Thank you, Commissioner Ernst. Commissioner Edge, I don't know that you're necessarily qualifying that cap. I think you're saying you recommend that staff, or that it be considered. Is that right? You're not trying to establish a cap. Okay, and which I think, Commissioner Ernst, that gets to your point that it should be considered. Commissioner Sherman, did you raise your hand?
I did. Thanks, Chair Roosevelt. I guess just maybe point of process, like, we are voting on some language to recommend forward to council. So I don't know if we should be recommending, for lack of a better word, and hopefully you won't take it offensively, Vice Chair Edge, like a little bit more of an abstract policy position. Like, I think we need language to recommend forward. Is that correct or not?
Mary, I was under the...
It's almost a footnote.
Oh, yeah. So, Mary, I was under the impression that we could essentially approve with this formally capturing this recommendation for city council purposes?
I believe so. I mean, I'd defer to like Brett or Laura, just to make sure what's the proper way to do it. Like, does it have to be an actual amended code language proposal, or if it's just like Commissioner Edge suggesting that a minimum threshold for student enrollment of a certain number be provided to council, or have them think about a minimum threshold.
Laura, can you respond to that?
Yeah, I do believe that I agree that it doesn't have to be the precise language. I think that you can just approve this and with the recommendation that you would like the city council to have this discussion.
So I could chime in a little bit here too. I think your position here isn't necessarily written in stone in terms of how your recommendation needs to be forwarded to council. You've got a package in front of you put together by staff. You have heard testimony about it. Well, I guess we didn't have any public testimony. You've asked clarifying questions of staff and you closed the record and have deliberated on it. It sounds like, and I don't want to speak for all of the commissioners, but it sounds like you all are in favor of it, but would like council to make certain considerations possibly when they consider it at their hearing. So there will be a separate hearing. And I think if your intent is, and you can form your motion however you like, but I believe from what I'm hearing is your intent is to approve the language, but with, like Joseph said, Commissioner Edge said, a footnote that says we think council should consider, possibly looking at a numerical student population as some sort of limiting or expanding factor on your recommendation. And then there will be a hearing in front of council where they can consider your recommendation and deliberate on the issues themselves as to whether or not they feel that way.
Okay, so Commissioner Sherman,
And I also have one more point I'd like to ask because nobody's brought it up. In this day and age, I think it might be worth noting that the reader board, if we're looking at student populations, if we look at in-person students versus online students, that distinction may become important. Certainly in-person students see the sign every day when they go there. Online students don't really have the ability. If they're online and learning, they have a computer and the school's able to communicate with them. So that might be a distinction or something that you put in your consideration.
okay, thank you. Commissioner Sherman, I think that answers your question on process here. With that in mind, I think we could move to a motion. Is there a commissioner who would like to frame a motion? Commissioner Sherman?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve file number ZA-2021-003 as written, with the recommendation that City Council consider some sort of minimum threshold for the number of students at the public high school.
Physically.
Second.
All those in favor, I hear a second. Raise your hand or.
Aye.
Okay. Seeing all those commissioners in favor, all those opposed, please raise your hand. And none opposed. It has been moved and seconded. We have approval. All right. Moving on then to 5.2, here we go. The public hearing then for the Kellogg Bowl redevelopment is called to order. The purpose of the hearing is to consider an applicant master file number DR-2021-003. The purpose of the application is for approval to construct a new 6-story multifamily building on the property located at 10306 Southeast Main Street. The applicant has the burden of proving the application is consistent with the City of Milwaukee's zoning and subdivision ordinance, comprehensive plan, and any applicable municipal code provision, and that the proposal conforms with all of the city's applicable criteria. I now ask that staff cite the zoning ordinance section where the criteria can be found.
Okay, those criteria are in Milwaukee Municipal Code, Chapter 12.16, Access Management, Section 19.301, Low Density Residential Zones, including R5, Section 19.304, Downtown Zones, including Downtown Mixed Use, DMU, Section 19.402, Natural Resources, Subsection 19.505.3D6, Building Facade Design for Multifamily Buildings, Section 19.508, Downtown Site and Building Design Standards, Chapter 19.600, Off-Street Parking and Loading, Chapter 19.700, Public Facility Improvements, Section 19.902, Amendments to Maps and Ordinances, Section 19.907, Downtown Design Review, Section 19.911, Variances, Section 19.1006, Type 3 Review, and Section 19.1011, Design Review Meetings.
All right, thank you. All testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria. Failure to address the criterion or raise an issue with sufficient detail to allow the Planning Commission an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue precludes appeal to the City Council based on that issue. Failure to raise the constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow a response precludes an action for damage in circuit court. Any party withstanding may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission to the City Council. Persons withstanding are those who submit written comments or testify in person via Zoom. I will recognize those persons who provide testimony. Before you testify, please remember to state your name and spell it for the record. Please also state your city of residence. If you are here to testify, please remember to confine your remarks to the application and relevant criteria and to avoid repetition and non-relevant information. If additional documents or evidence are provided by any party, the commission may, if requested, allow a continuance or leave the record open to allow the parties a reasonable opportunity to respond. Any such continuance or extension shall be subject to the limitations of the 120-day rule unless the continuance or extension is requested or agreed by the applicant. We will be limiting comments this evening to 3 minutes in length. Let's talk then about conflict of interest. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to abstain from this hearing? Please physically raise your hand. I see one hand raised. Commissioner Khosrowbadi.
Yes, I don't know, maybe I can be a part of the discussion. But I do have a conflict. I am currently involved in an issue involving the neighboring site of the Oddfellows for illegal dumping that was done on that site. And because of that, there's still a lot of questions that are still being asked, and DEQ is involved with that as well. So I'm probably biased about this project simply because of the current issues that are going on with the neighboring site that actually does involve parts of the Kellogg Bowl site. So I don't want to go too far into it because I don't want to conflict any commissioners on here, but I believe because of that I have a conflict with that because I was approached by members of the community and I do agree with them on that part.
Thank you, Commissioner Khosrowbadi. Laura or Justin, would you like to weigh in on that at all, or just?
I'm not quite sure I understand the nature of the conflict. You're involved in an issue with a neighboring site.
Right, it's right next. It's the Oddfellow site, which basically shares the same land as Kellogg Bowl, and there was some illegal dumping done on that site that is currently being looked at, and I'm involved with that investigation. So I feel like I don't know if I can That's why I'm not sure if there is a conflict, but that's why I'm bringing this up now.
I want to parse your words a little bit on that. You say it involves the same land. Does it involve the Kellogg site, or does it involve a piece of property that's off of the Kellogg site?
That's a good question, because it's right in the back lot in the vegetation area.
And is anybody involved in the Kellogg development or the Kellogg current property owners involved in the process that you're?
No, not that I'm aware of, no.
Yeah, I don't really see a conflict. I don't see how your involvement here could result in any pecuniary gain or loss on your behalf, depending on how you would decide or participate in this particular hearing. So based on what you've said right now, I don't have too much of a concern that you have an actual conflict of interest as defined.
Okay, excellent. That's why I wanted to make sure. I didn't want to put myself in that position. So thank you. Then I won't be abstaining.
Okay, glad to have you aboard. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest? Seeing no hand raised, I will move on. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to report an ex parte contact? Hand raised if so. Commissioner Ernst, you look confused. Commissioner Kostrobody. Okay, go with Commissioner Ernst. You raised your hand.
Okay, I'm not sure when exactly. I know I've been trying to work on something to just kind of read a disclaimer on some of these things that come before us. But I run a local community group with about 8,000 members, and I do get tagged in a lot of posts, and I see a lot. I don't see all of them. But I know that there has been a lot of more discussion lately on just different projects that are going around town. And I believe some members of the community DM'd me about the illegal dumping or that kind of situation going on. I don't feel like I don't have any bias, and I don't have any conflict of interest. I just don't know how to say, you know, I manage a group with 8,000 or so community members that talk about all of these things online in text. And, you know, I try when I see if those kind of things, if I get tagged in them, or if they, you know, fall in my feed, I try to just kind of stay neutral or not follow along if I know that it's something that's kind of on our agenda. But I can't, I couldn't tell you specifics even because I don't remember. It's a lot of, it's, you know, we're talking 32,000 comments, you know.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ernst. Would the city attorney like to comment on ex parte contacts brought up by Commissioner Ernst?
I mean, I think the crux of what I believe you say is that you have received ex parte contacts in your position moderating this forum of some sort, but that you don't recall the specifics of them, and you only see them in your capacity as the moderator. And I think just by receipt and announcing your position in that regard, you've sufficiently disclosed your ex parte contacts to the extent you need to disclose them.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kostrobody, you also raised your hands.
Yes. In dealing with the other issue, I did walk the site with a member of the community, and the site was discussed briefly of where it was going to be put in place.
Okay. I'm going to move on. Does anybody, oh gosh, Commissioner Hamer, go ahead.
As long as we're doing this. I have been in conversation as a board member of the Milwaukee Historical Society with a representative of the Historic NDA and of Polish Commercial Development about things that maybe we could get from inside the building. And so, and that's all we've ever discussed, or maybe even the outside sign. So there we go.
Anybody else want to jump on? Okay, I'm going to move forward. All right, that was your chance. Will any commissioner who has visited the site prior to this hearing please raise your hand physically? all having raised hand. Good job, everybody. Did any of those commissioners who visited the site speak to anyone at the site or know anything different that is indicated in staff report for this application? Please raise your hand. Seeing one hand raised, Commissioner Kashrabadi.
It's the same situation as before, right? As an ex parte contact, walking the site with a member of the community, right? But
Excellent. And would you say anything was different than what staff had provided in the report?
No.
Okay, thank you. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the participation of any member of the Planning Commission? I'll give you just a few seconds to either raise your hand or what was that, Commissioner Edge, *9? *9 if you were on the phone, one of those three numbers, and wish to raise your hand via Zoom call in. Brett or Mary, are we seeing anybody?
Not seeing anyone.
Okay, I will move it on then. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter? Again, raise your hand via Zoom or *9 if you are on the phone and would like to comment. Give you just a couple of seconds and then ask Mary if she sees any activity. Looking like she doesn't.
I do. I have one person with their hand raised.
All right. Individual raising your hand, if you are, can we allow them to speak then, Mary?
Yeah, 1 second.
I'll just ask you to state your name and your city of residence.
Should be able to talk. They'd have to unmute. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My name is David Sharon. I live in Milwaukee, but I own the property at 10423 Southeast 23rd, which is directly behind the proposed building. And my only concern, and I was unable to go to the meeting this month, the Milwaukee Neighborhood District Association, to state my concern just about security of my property and the other properties that.
Sorry, I just want to stop you at that moment because this is not the appropriate time to raise such concern. This is specific.
Okay, I'm sorry. I did not understand what was appropriate or inappropriate. So.
Not a problem. If you want to hold tight, we'll definitely get to your opportunity here. This is if you have any specific challenge to the jurisdiction of the commission.
No, I don't. No.
Okay, then hold tight. We'll get through staff report and we'll have an opportunity certainly for you to speak at that time. Thank you. So last opportunity, anybody in attendance wanting to challenge jurisdiction? And Mary, if you're seeing that on, let's proceed then to staff report.
Should you share it?
Simply get to the Zoom page.
It'll be on that screen. You have to move the mouse over. Yeah. What's the where the video of us?
Oh.
Yeah, and then that. Yep. And then, there we go.
All right, thank you. Bear with me here.
New technology. There we go.
Okay, we're sharing, I think. All right, good evening, Planning Commissioners. I'm Brett Kelver. I'm Associate Planner with the City of Milwaukee, and I'll be leading you through the staff presentation for this project, the redevelopment of the Kellogg Bowl site with a new development that's tentatively named Henley Place at 10306 Southeast Main Street. And the master file number as shown on the slide here is a downtown design review file number DR-2021-003. So a quick overview of the project. What's being proposed is the demolition and removal of the current Kellogg Bowl building and replacement of it with a new 6-story building with approximately 178 multifamily units in it. That would include 2 units on the ground floor that are designated for live-work function. So primarily a residence, but also serving as a potentially commercial space. The project proposes almost a 1-to-1 parking ratio with 173 off-street parking spaces. These would all be at the ground level of the building. A majority of those spaces would be basically within a parking structure. So within kind of the first floor of the building, about 142 spaces there. And then additionally, some spaces, about 14 spaces in front of the building outside, and about 17 spaces in a small lot outside at the rear of the building. The applicant team will have an opportunity to present a little more detail and explain more of some of the special features of the building. It does include a number of different amenity spaces for the tenants, including some rooftop terraces, interior spaces, shared spaces, as well as private patios and balconies. Just a couple of comments quickly to set the stage for the project and the site. It's outlined here in red. This is from the applicant materials. You can see it's adjacent to the Pietro's Pizza site, as well as Commissioner Casarvati was mentioning the Oddfellows Hall is just to the north of this property. It is kind of a flag lot shaped property. It is primarily zoned DMU for downtown mixed use. That allows multifamily residential development outright as an outright allowed use. The building height that's allowed in this zone, in this particular part of the zone, is a base height of 4 stories, and you can get up to 2 additional stories as a bonus if you provide certain features. In this case, the applicant is providing obviously residential housing. That's one of the options for a bonus, and they are also proposing to make it a certified green building with a particular certification program. In terms of parking, I already mentioned that they're providing almost a 1-to-1. That is beyond the minimum that is required for this zone. Typically, there's 1 space required per dwelling unit, but in the downtown mixed-use zone, because of the increased density there, the proximity to light rail, to transit, there is an allowed 25% reduction in the parking. So that would allow, just for the zoning alone, the applicant only has to provide approximately 133 parking spaces. They're providing 40 more spaces than that, and they can tell you a little bit more about that as well. But it is essentially a 1-to-1 parking ratio there. And just a final note on what determines how many units or what density would be allowed in the zone. It's essentially in the DMU zone. It's determined more or less by the building height. So that's what, how they're using the height and the space on the property is more or less what determines how many units are there. I've noted the master application file, but there are actually several different individual applications that are part of the overall package, and the components in the order that I'll walk through them briefly tonight include a zoning map amendment. There are several variances to some of the specific development standards for the downtown zone. There's kind of the flagship downtown design review piece of it to look at the design of the building because of some natural resource areas, some actual protected water features that are not on the site but adjacent to the site do result in a little bit of natural resource designation on the southern part of the property. So there's a natural resource review component. And there was a traffic impact study performed, and that has been reviewed under the Transportation Facilities Review application. So those are the components that we'll be talking about tonight. Just to begin with the zoning map amendment, you can see here the red color. Well, first of all, the site is outlined in bright yellow. It includes 2 lots, kind of the access way or pole portion of the lot, and then the larger piece where the actual building will go. You can see that a majority of the site is zoned DMU, downtown mixed use, but kind of the most northeastern portion of the site, which does abut the residential area there to the east, it is zoned R5. That's basically the part of the site that has, for a long time, been part of the Kellogg Bowl site and has served as a surface parking lot. That same portion is what's being proposed to be rezoned as downtown mixed use. and it would continue to serve as a surface level exterior parking lot, the function that it's serving today. So a lot of text here, but the point is there are the criteria for approving a zoning map amendment. The key one here is the proposed change compatible with the character of the area, where the site is, what's the pattern of land use and development in the area, and what are we expecting, as well as consistency with a variety of different comprehensive plan goals, regional policies, state goals, and administrative rules. And you can see here in the graphic, a majority of the area actually in our comprehensive plan for land use is already designated to be town center. So that is, the kind of place where you would expect to see downtown mixed use zoning. You can see just to the south where the brighter green color is a kind of a downtown open space designation. That's where the part of the pond is. So in essence, the proposed zoning amendment, we've been looking at it as kind of something that essentially just kind of cleans up an existing inconsistency with our zoning map and would make the entire site DMU, which would be more in line with how it's been used to now. But here for reference are the approval criteria. If as part of your deliberation and discussion, you need them for reference. Next, the variances. Originally, there were four variances were requested to specific downtown development standards, and those variances are largely necessitated by the shape and the configuration of the lot. It is an uncharacteristic lot for our downtown zone. Most of the lots that we're looking at in downtown actually have, street frontage, have, at least one side, if not two sides or more, direct frontage on Main Street or one of the other streets downtown. This is a highly unusual flag lot configuration downtown. That makes it really difficult, nearly, practically impossible to meet some of these development standards, especially the first two, the street setback requirement, which requires, it limits the distance that a new building would be set back from the street. The idea is we want downtown development to be, very close to, if not right at, that boundary with the public right of way, so there's engagement with pedestrians. Similarly, the frontage occupancy requirement, that's for the length of the frontage of the site. You're supposed to have at least 50% of that frontage length be occupied by a building. In this case, the access way is about 55 feet wide, and the main portion of the site is actually, over 250 feet back from the street. So it's just highly impractical to try to locate, put 50% worth of building in that access way space. The other two variances for the development standards, off-street parking and open space, are also due in large part to the shape of the lot, and they're actually kind of in some tension in relationship to each other. The off-street parking standard says, in most cases, the code does not want to have surface parking in between the street or the front lot line and the building. That's because, again, like I said before, the code is wanting to have more engagement of the building at the front property line. In this case, by necessity, the building is set quite a bit back. When a building is set back, that portion that is set back from the front property line, 50% of it is supposed to be open space. In this case, most of this access way or the pole is providing vehicle and pedestrian access to the building. And so, again, a variance is deemed necessary to address that standard. The applicant's providing some parking in that area, as well as some open space, just not getting to the 50% mark. And then as we reviewed the application and we're working through the findings, there are some specific standards relating to parking structures or structured parking. That is, in this case, the majority of the parking spaces that are inside the building on the first floor. There's a requirement that on the ground level of those parking structures, at least 75% of the length or of the building face is supposed to have some kind of window or opening doorway, so that we're not getting a blank wall at the ground level where we have parking structures. In this case, the structure is providing not 75%, but close, nearly 60%. And so it's a challenging standard to meet given the nature of what else is trying to happen with the building. And the applicants may be able to speak a little bit more to some of the structural challenges or that aspect of it. But those are the 5 variances that are being requested that we could discuss more if needed. For reference, there are 2 sets of criteria for approving variances. In this case, the discretionary relief criteria are the ones that we're applying to the parking structure variance, where the burden is to show that the request is reasonable, it's appropriate, and it does one or more of these things, to minimize impacts, has some kind of public benefit, or it's responding somehow to its environment. And as you would see if you review the findings, the staff proposal was that the parking structure variance was meeting those requirements. Because of the shape of the site and the challenges that we discussed before about how to get an effective building on it, the applicant has chosen to address the economic hardship criteria for the 4 downtown development standard variances that are being requested. Normally, staff discourages applicants from taking this path because it usually, for most cases, seems very difficult to meet them. In this case, it actually seemed quite appropriate for them to choose the economic hardship criteria to address, because development of the site, including that access way, is extremely challenging. Any development, I think, will be challenged to do much more with the access way than the applicants are proposing with this particular structure. But again, for reference, if needed in your discussions, this slide and these criteria are available for reference. Now, one of the key pieces of the application package is the downtown design review. That is looking at the design standards that we have in the code, and where needed, looking at the design guidelines for downtown that are in a separate document that's referenced in the code. This is a piece that for projects of this scale that require type 3 review, discretionary review, the Downtown and Landmarks Committee, the DLC, has a role similar to what you just did with Mary's sign application you're talking about. The DLC in this case reviews the design portion of the building and makes a recommendation to the Planning Commission. In this case, the DLC met on July 8th. And here, I've got a couple of slides. I'll get back to this. They met on July 8th in a public design review meeting. Overall, they recommended approval of the project, and as was referenced in one of the attachments to the staff report, they had several different recommendations for consideration. None of these things were deemed, what's the right word, necessary for the application to be approvable. Again, to clarify, the DLC did believe that the design that was presented met all the applicable standards and guidelines when necessary. They did have these specific suggestions for the Planning Commission's consideration. We can come back to that. There are 7 design elements within the code, and so the project was reviewed against the specific standards in all of these. One of the 7, the standard for corners, is not applicable to residential only buildings like the proposed building. So the other 6 are what were considered by the DLC. The 3 in the middle, C, D, and E, that are highlighted, those are the 3 design element areas where on maybe one or more specific standards, the project didn't quite meet the standard. And in that case, what's looked at is the purpose statement or the intent of each of the design element areas, as well as any applicable design guidelines. And so the findings for this section do kind of discuss those different areas. It was weather protection, exterior building materials, and for windows and doors. Again, just maybe 1 or 2 specific standards weren't met by the project, but the DLC reviewed the materials. The applicant made an argument for how their design is meeting the purpose and intent of those particular design element sections. And again, the DLC recommended approval with those recommendations. Not to linger on these, but again, just for reference, if needed in your discussions, I've got 2 elevations or 2 views of building faces. This is the west elevation. This is what would be seen from Main Street. And this is basically the rear elevation, what would be seen from that little portion of 23rd Avenue that approaches the rear of the building. So again, in case this is useful for any of your discussion or deliberation, we can come back to these slides. Again, here are the recommendations for the DLC just for consideration. The next big piece was natural resource review. And again, the situation here, I've got the two white background images. Let me see if I can get my mouse over here. Are showing, these are from the plan set from the applicant. This one where my mouse is showing the dashed line is the boundary of the water quality resource buffer, which extends approximately 50 feet from the edge of the pond that is just to the south and adjacent to the site. So I was presented some frustration for the applicant because it is true there is not a protected water feature on the site. It's also true that the site is currently completely developed. It's, in this area in particular, it's serving as paved off-street parking. Nevertheless, there is by code a 50-foot vegetated corridor area that has to be considered for the development. And our determination based on the code was that if the applicant was simply repaving this area and not introducing the new three-dimensional aspect of a building into it, the code does allow for an exemption for natural resource review. But in this case, obviously there is more mass. There is a three-dimensional building coming into a portion of the vegetated corridor, and that is what triggered the need for natural resource review. The applicant has presented as part of their submittal materials a technical report prepared by a natural resource professional, and we had that report reviewed by the city's on-call natural resource consultant. The recommendation was that there be some, and what was proposed was, and agreed with was some kind of a vegetated planting strip. The applicants proposed a 10-foot wide strip to provide something, a feature that's not there now, which is some actual vegetation on the site, serving as a little bit of a buffer between the pond and the building. The suggestion from the city's consultant on review was that in general, like trying to get closer to a 1-to-1 ratio of how much new disturbance is there in the area to how much new planting is, resulted in a recommendation that's in one of that's considered, I guess, a key condition of approval, and that is to push the applicant to expand somewhat the planting area. And we had tried to leave it general just to encourage the applicant to get closer to the approximately 3,250 square foot mark that is represented by the new disturbance of the building, to try to push a little bit to expand their planting area in a way that might make sense given what else they're trying to do to the site, but to try to get a little closer to the 1-to-1 ratio. And so here are the three key criteria for natural resource review are: one, to try to avoid new impacts to the resource area. When avoidance is not really possible, to at least then minimize the new disturbance, and then to also mitigate for disturbance. In this case, the applicant made what we felt was a sufficient argument that it really wasn't practical to have no disturbance, to have none of the new building in the site and have a viable project. And so the argument was this is kind of represents the minimum amount of disturbance, and that we think that with the condition we've recommended, there is adequate mitigation. So finally, I guess just to summarize, staff's recommendation overall was for approval of the whole package. So all those elements that we talked about that are here in parentheses, and to adopt the recommended findings and conditions of approval. I do have a couple of minor adjustments that I would like to present for consideration. These relate mostly to a couple of notes that I referred to in a note to the Planning Commission last week. Just to kind of, one was a clarification of one of the natural resource findings to make the finding match the condition a little bit better. That is to have the finding be a little bit more general about trying to get just in generally more closer to a 1-to-1 planting ratio. And then another suggested revision is simply to make a correction. I think at one point, the development was referred to as a senior housing development, and that was my clerical error. I was borrowing a little too much from a past set of findings. So I can present those to staff, to the commission when it's time, if you get to a point of being able to make a decision, so you can see clearly what those proposed revisions are. As I noted, there are several conditions of approval. Most of them are fairly minor. The one that I highlighted before is just recommending that the applicant expand the mitigation planting area to get a little closer to a 1-to-1 ratio. And with that, we just highlight your decision-making options. You can approve the application with the revisions that we're proposing. You might have some additional modifications that you'd like to add in order to approve the application, and we'll just try to make sure we capture those. You can continue the hearing, or if you like to give staff direction to prepare findings to deny the application, we can explore that as well. We do have time left on the 120-day land use clock that runs until September 25th. That's the last day that we have to get a final decision that would include a planning commission decision and allowing time for an appeal to city council. So with that, I guess I'll just a couple of final notes before I'll take some questions from you. And that is just to cover a couple points. This, while is clearly a historic feeling property for a lot of people in Milwaukee, have spent some time or maybe a lot of time in the Kellogg Bowl and have a lot of history there. It is not actually on our official list of historic properties. And so that's why there's no historic resource review here. One of the recommendations of the DLC was that the applicant do what they could to document some of the history of the building, just so that is on hand to be kind of preserved for the future. There have been several questions that have come up both at the design review meeting that the DLC conducted and also at the historic Milwaukee neighborhood meeting about allowing public access through the site from 23rd Avenue. Right now, it's not open for vehicle access, but pedestrians and bicycles can and have for a long time cut through from 23rd to get to either the Kellogg Bowl site itself or Pietro's Pizza or other parts of Main Street. There is no formal public access easement across the property, and none is required by any of the criteria for this application. So it's something, again, the applicant may have some thoughts or may want to address any questions that come up about that. But just to be clear, there's no requirement for the public to be allowed to access through the site. Right now, you're technically trespassing if you're walking through the site and not going to the Kellogg Bowl, and that would technically be the case in the future. Just to be clear, we don't think we have the grounds to require that. And then finally, just to clarify, right now there is no vehicle access to the site from 23rd Avenue. That will change only for emergency vehicles. So the barrier that's there now will be removed, and the street will be basically paved at about 20 or 22 feet wide to the site. There will be no parking allowed in that section. It's not wide enough for that. The rear parking area is gated and will only be accessible in the event of an emergency for a fire truck or some emergency vehicle to use as a turnaround. So just to be clear, that is not designed or intended to be a point of regular vehicle access to the site. So with that, I think I am finished with the staff presentation. I'll take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Brett. That was a great presentation. A lot of really good detail. Before we move on, are there any clarifying questions commissioners may have for staff? Commissioner Edge.
Thanks for that, Brett. The question I had is, was there ever any consideration along the way of dedicating that flagpole as a public street?
Yeah, that was a conversation that the city had with the applicant. Again, not a requirement, but we did entertain that idea. We acknowledged that the city would be open if the applicant wanted to dedicate that a portion, some or all of the access way as public right of way. I think, and the applicant can speak a little bit more about some of their thoughts on it. My impression is that, in part because they are trying to provide some guaranteed parking in front of the building. If the access way were to become a public street, it would be public parking, and there would be a lot less control the applicant would have over it. There may be some other reasons or details the applicant could explain about that. But yes, the short answer is yes, we did talk about that with the applicant, not as a requirement, but as an option.
So then, kind of just coming back to the access from 23rd and how that works. We've had applications come through here before, and I just want to understand. I'd like to know if you could help us understand the difference, where it was going to be because of the block size requirement. That it was a requirement for a particular development, maximum block size, for street, to provide a street access from a public street on one end of the development to a public street on the other end of the development. And I'm wondering why exactly that doesn't come into play here.
Yeah, fair question. I'll say what I know or think about that, and maybe Laura or Justin can chime in. What I'm thinking of are some scenarios where there's been maybe a proposed land division where someone's looking to partition or subdivide a property. And for sure in those situations, we've gotten into questions about some of the block length standard and looking at opportunities to provide better connections. This application doesn't involve any land division. It's simply working with an existing site. And so I think that question of block length is not really in play because there is no proposal to create new properties here, new divided lots. Let's see, I had another thought, but I might have lost it. Right, sorry, yeah, that's what I got. If I think of what I was thinking of,
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I saw one other commissioner with a hand raised for staff. Commissioner Kashrabadi?
Yeah, I'm sorry, real quick, you might have already, well, you actually did already mention it, but real quick, did you say it was going to be gated, that entry that was for emergency vehicles only? Did you say there would be a gate there?
Yeah, let me share my screen quickly again, and this might be good to just have a visual of, to be clear. So let me go back into see if I can find a map. So on this view, so here is the rear parking area. And this is where that parking lot touches the 23rd Avenue right-of-way. And I don't know if you can quite see this faint line. This is where there would actually be a gate across the entryway or the driveway of the parking lot onto 23rd. So, I mean, an emergency vehicle could approach the building and get pretty close to it. In order to get out of there, a fire truck is probably going to have to open the gate and back out to get in. But this is what I was referring to when I said this is the part that would be gated.
Okay.
So to follow up, I mean, pedestrians and bicycles, like I said, already can go through the current barrier here. They would have better access, and that has led to some of the questions that people have understandably had, which is to say, well, if I can be in the public right-of-way on a bike or on my feet, why can't I pass through the site? And that's where, we've just had to acknowledge that there is not a formal public easement requirement to allow people to move from the public right-of-way through the site somewhere else. Does that answer your question there?
Yes, thank you. And one other thing, the vegetation that's back there, is that how much of that is going to be affected?
Now, when you say vegetation back here, do you mean in this portion of the site?
Yeah, the northern part, yes, correct.
Well, I think that, as I understand it, the boundary of the 23rd Avenue right-of-way, in this area, it actually touches a city-owned parcel, and then I think there's ODOT right-of-way that gets closer to the actual Highway 224. As I understand it, most of the work to kind of do the paving to kind of finish out the street, I don't think it's going to expand much beyond, well, it certainly won't expand much beyond the actual right-of-way boundary. I don't know exactly, how much vegetation might have encroached from the city-owned, parcel into the right-of-way. But in terms of boundaries, at least, the improvements will more or less stop at the boundary of the current right-of-way. I don't know if that quite gets at what you're hoping to understand.
Yeah, you're good. No, I got you. Thank you.
Are there other commissioners with questions for Commissioner Sherman?
Thanks, Chair Losfeld. Brett, could you go back to that? Sorry.
Sorry. Are you seeing it?
And the slide preview for the next slide.
Yeah,
at least I'm seeing that.
Yeah, so end screen share and then start again.
Oh, I have to stop and start again?
Yeah. Scott said that could be an issue.
Can you see it now?
Yes, but can still also see the slide preview.
Slide preview.
Yeah, we're seeing the presenter view.
Yeah. I don't know what to do. Maybe pick that one.
All right, let me try again. Sorry, thanks for bearing with me here.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
How about now?
Perfect.
Okay.
I think I was just kind of wanting to understand. So with the area in the northeast corner, the parking lot kind of in the back, with it being gated, so someone drives down Main Street, down the access driveway that is not public right of way, into garage door comes up. They then drive through there. Another garage door comes up, and they kind of go out, and that's where they would presumably park.
Correct.
And would it only be the city of or the Clackamas County Fire and paramedics who would have access to open and close that gate, or would the property owner? I could see that gate becoming something that remains open because it's just much more convenient for people.
Yeah, the applicant may have a better answer to that as part of their presentation. That's a fair question. My working assumption is that, you know, by calling it an emergency access only gate, that I don't know technically who has a key, but I would guess that for sure, like emergency service folks would. Maybe the property owner does as well, as a matter of just like in case there's some other, I don't know, like there's a natural hazard emergency and they need to let everybody out of the site as quickly as possible. I don't know. Maybe the applicant team might be able to address that better. That's a good question.
Okay. And then I did see, I think at some point, maybe Steve Adams was on, and you might be able to answer this as well, but in walking 23rd, it only appears to be, you know, a single travel lane, maybe with a little bit of parking. Like the street from a width perspective isn't necessarily, maybe isn't built out to the full right of way. Can you help us understand kind of what does or does not exist there with respect to northwest or southeast 23rd?
Sure, I can wander into that a little bit. Is Steve on?
Yep.
Is he in as a presenter? I mean, I could maybe just let Steve, I don't want to totally throw him on the spot, Cole, but I can, Steve, if you want to answer that.
I'll complete the answer on the gate. These access gates are typically a dual lock. One lock has a Clackamas Fire District has a key to it. The other lock is a standard Public Works lock. So Public Works can access the lock, Clackamas Fire. Typically, those are the only two locks on these gates. I have not seen a case before where the apartment management has a lock to it. It's just for emergency access, and that's how I've done it in my past. As far as 23rd Avenue, it is narrow. It's 23 feet. It's not a highly used street, so it's fairly quiet and calm. It'll stay that way because people aren't going to have access to the parking or to the apartment building. The one thing we'll need to do at the north end of 23rd, in order for fire trucks to have access to 23rd Avenue and this back area, we are going to have to place some no parking signage along a short frontage of 23rd along the east side to allow a fire truck proper maneuvering into the narrow 22-foot wide or 21-foot wide street there. But we're not requiring any improvements on 23rd, no.
Yeah, sorry, this may not be the greatest graphic, but it's one I could get to quickly. I think Steve's talking about maybe a little bit of no parking signage in this area here, just so that a fire vehicle can make the corner, make sure there's clearance for that. That's what you're referring to, Steve?
Correct.
And would there be no parking on 23rd itself as well?
We haven't talked about extending the no parking because there hasn't been a problem since. I never hear complaints. I never hear a problem on it. We just need to have a certain area of 23rd sign no parking so a fire truck could make that corner should they need to.
Okay. Yeah, I was in touring the site this afternoon on the north side of the property 10345. I think there was 3 or 4 vehicles parked on 23rd. And I can tell you there would have been no way you could have gotten a fire truck down that, or maybe even an ambulance down that street.
that street will also be assigned as no parking because it's only, I think, 21 feet wide, I think is what we're requiring, 21, 22 feet wide, which means no parking on either side.
Thanks. I think those were my questions.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Sherman. Are there others? Hang on, let me check all the videos here. I'm seeing no other commissioners with their hands raised. Brett, maybe you could unshare. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, I think it's fair to.
You just muted, Lauren.
Sorry, I was holding the space bar a little too long. One second. All right, so let's move on then. Have we received any correspondence on the matter other than those included in the meeting packet? And Brett, I believe that we have.
We have, and I think maybe one way I'll try this is another screen share. Hopefully this will work. Oh, shoot.
Nope, we got it.
Is that showing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Oh, it's showing on our end, but it's not showing on that screen, so you have to move it. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. So what I've got here is part of the document that I can show you a little bit more later as well, that has a couple of the proposed changes to the findings. What I've got in yellow.
For some reason, it's just not centered, so we can't see the full. I don't know if you can just move your slide bar.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is that any better?
No.
Maybe make it bigger, Brett.
How about now?
I don't see any change at all.
Oh, what is going on?
Maybe in the PDF do view.
We are looking at PDF with highlighted text.
View this full screen mode towards the bottom.
You? Sorry.
No, keep going down. All the way down.
Oh.
Full screen mode. Just two up. Yeah, do it.
How about this?
Oh.
Brett, I think that what you are looking at is not what we are looking at on the screen. You might have two windows open.
All right, I think you're sharing the wrong screen there. Maybe just back out and try again.
And Brett, maybe it would be good just to highlight the comments that we've received that were not forwarded to the Planning Commission, if there were any, because the Planning Commission has received all of the comments as of a certain time today.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess for the record, I wanted to just voice what we had received. I'm not sure how I'm driving this. Okay, I'm sorry. Just let me try. How do I get back to Zoom on this?
So let's.
I'm sorry. We're working with, this is a little new for me here with the multiple screens.
No problem.
We have a whole new setup in City Hall so that we can do in-person and online meetings. So we have a new setup. So this is the first time that we've had to drive it. So there's just a little bumpy.
Oh, I don't know what I did to lose the Zoom window. And would it be over here on this screen somewhere?
Sharing? They're still sharing.
Well, maybe. So I can't figure out how to get back to stop sharing. I've lost the Zoom.
What if I can do something on my end?
Oh, sorry, I see it. Okay. All right. Stop sharing. Let me try one more time. If this doesn't work, I'll just read it. Okay.
There you go.
Nice. There you go. All right. We're seeing highlighted text, nicely centered.
Okay. So this is some proposed additions to the findings, just to capture these. The yellow highlighted comments are ones that we actually received since we sent the packet out last Tuesday up through earlier this afternoon. I'll just quickly read the names: Daniel Eisenbeis, Craig Gustafson, and I'll apologize if I've misspelled. I'll try to correct it, or if I'm mispronouncing. Michelle Ansel, Nick Nyman, Sarah Chin, Francisco Perez, Carrie Goldner. Those were all comments that we received before I came to City Hall, like just before 5 o'clock. Since then, I think we've gotten 2 more comments. I think they could be also described as generally in opposition to the project, in general, from Peter Stevens and Janella Abbas. I will pull those into the proposed findings for this, but the yellow highlighted ones represent the ones that were forwarded to the Planning Commission. And in addition to these other 2 that came after the packet was published.
Okay, and I believe, Mary, you have also forwarded on Peter Stevens and
Yes.
and Janella's this evening. So we have received all of those, Brett. Thank you.
Okay.
So that summarizes what's been received. I think now we can move on to applicant testimony.
Yes.
Applicant present, and do they wish to provide comment?
Yeah, let's let him in just in case. Okay, we're promoting some members of the applicant team right now. Kurt Schultz.
And so when doing that, just a note, please identify yourself, first and last name, and also cite your city of residence prior to providing a comment or presentation.
Okay, so I'll ask the applicant team to let me know if there's anyone else they know of who they can see as currently an attendee that we need to promote into panelists for right now. We've pulled in Kurt, Zach, Scott, Chris from Kittleson, the AKS team.
Yeah, is Maria Miller there from AKS? She's going to be running the presentation.
Oh, would she have let's see, did we get AKS? Go to AKS's.
It may be the AKS.
Good evening, everyone. Can you see us?
Oh, there they are.
Okay. Got them? Oh, yeah, okay. I think we can see you. Yeah. Does that look like everybody for now? Okay.
Great. Whoever is leading off, just a reminder, state your name and city of residence, and then welcome to share your screen.
All right. Good evening, Chair Roosevelt. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Maria Miller. I'm a land use planner with AKS here on behalf of the applicant. We also have here today Kurt Schultz, project architect with Sarah Design, John Morse, civil engineer with AKS and project manager, Stacy Reed, senior biologist, wetland scientist at AKS, Chris Bremer, senior principal engineer at Kilson and Associates, who is the traffic engineering consultant for the project. And we have the applicant, Polish Commercial, and Zach Pyle, the development manager, is representing Polish here today. So our team is available to answer any questions after the presentation. First, I'd like to thank city staff and Brett in particular for the thorough presentation today and for working with us throughout these several months to take us through the review process, through the design and landmarks committee approval, and finally to the hearing tonight. I'm
sorry, who's presenting right now and your city of residence, please?
My name is Maria Miller. My city of residence is Tualatin.
Great, thank you.
So the project we have here today is a redevelopment of an approximately 1.94 acre site at the north end of Milwaukee downtown mixed-use zone. The site has been vacant since Kellogg bowling alley closed in November of 2020 the property presents an excellent opportunity for the revitalization of downtown Milwaukee due to its high location efficiency. You can see that the site is about a 10-minute walk to the mapped orange line light rate station. It's within walking distance to shops and restaurants along Main Street, downtown Milwaukee, the Sunday Farmers Market on Main and Harrison. Safeway grocery store is less than a mile away. The schools within the area, within half a mile radius actually of the project, include Milwaukee El Puente Elementary School, Milwaukee High School, the Portland Waldorf School. There's employment directly north of the site. The site is really well connected and in the middle of mixed use community. The redevelopment of the site does present some challenges, as Brad pointed out. You can see mostly due to the very unusual configuration of the property. It's comprised of 2 tax lots. The main portion of the site, the bigger tax lot here, is approximately 1.6 acres in size, and it's set back from Main Street by about 260 feet. So it gains its access through this long and narrow tax lot, which is perpendicular to Main Street, and it historically has been shared by the adjoining businesses to the north and to the south as a driveway and a parking lot. This access lot has a recorded easement all over the whole lot for ingress, egress, parking, and maintenance for the benefit of the vet clinic to the south. This configuration gives this site the appearance and function of a flag lot, but unfortunately the city code does not address such condition, and it's written with the assumption that the property has frontage on Main Street and serves as a block face. Brad's presentation explained that really well. So the site geometry is the reason for the various requests, which are all related to Main Street frontage code standards. And I will cover those later on in the presentation. This site is adjacent to lower density residential zone along the east property line. R5 zone here, there are a few single family homes on the back. And the small irregular shaped portion of the lot is also zoned R5. It's about 0.2 acres in size, and it's currently being used as a parking lot. So it requires to be rezoned to DMU zone to continue to be used as a parking lot. So the area actually does have town center land use designation in the comprehensive plan. And DMU is the implementing zone for that land use designation. So the project unifies the property zoning and aligns it with the comprehensive plan goals for the area. The project itself is a multifamily residential building, which adds 178 units of needed housing to the City of Milwaukee housing stock. The City of Milwaukee Housing Needs Assessment reports demonstrates the need for 1,150 new housing units by year 2036. 330 units are rental units out of those identified. The apartments will be a mix of studios, 1-bedrooms, and 2-bedroom apartments. There is a live-work component in the building on the ground floor, with the residential area in the back of the unit and commercial storefront in the front. It's intended for small businesses, sole proprietors, and allows a kind of a low impact business within a residence. The project meets the parking requirement. We can discuss that later in the presentation. And the project provides almost 18,000 square feet of amenity space. So this is an enlargement of the site plan. Hopefully this can clarify some of the questions with access. It shows that the site has a single vehicular access off of Main Street through the flagpole portion of the lot. So it's a pedestrian and vehicular access through that site. The property does not currently have access or connection to 23rd Avenue along the east. The project extends the public roadway to the building and provides emergency vehicle turnaround. So due to the zoning change from R5 to DMU for the surface parking area, the project has to comply with Oregon Transportation Planning Rule, which makes sure that the zoning amendment does not result in a significant transportation impact to the city's transportation system. And to comply with this rule, the project includes what's called a trip cap. It limits the amount of trips, potential vehicle trips from the rezoned portion of the lot. So as part of this measure, the project is limiting access to Main Street only so that residents cannot take vehicular access to 23rd Avenue. You have to drive through the project, through the parking garage door out into the parking lot. And residents or management company does not have access to the gate. It's automatic to the emergency vehicles, or there is a knock box with a key for the fire department. So you won't be able to drive in or out of the parking lot onto 23rd Avenue. I will hand this off to Kurt with Sarah to discuss the architectural component of the project now.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, I'm Kurt Schultz, a principal at Sarah Architects, and good evening, commissioners. I really appreciate your time considering our proposal tonight. And also another thank you to Brett. Brett's been working with us since the summer and has really helped us navigate a very, very complicated site. And I really appreciate his efforts and did a great overview, made my job easy tonight. I wanted to give a brief overview of the architecture.
Could you just mention your city of residence? Sorry, sir.
Sorry, I'm a resident of Portland, Oregon.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. I'm here to give a brief overview of the architectural design of the building that we spent quite a bit of time with the DLC on a couple of weeks ago, and also appreciated their input. The building that's before you today, as Maria said, is 178 residential units in a 6-story building in the downtown mixed-use zone. What's been so tricky about the flag lot idea is what we've done essentially is design the building almost as if it was on Main Street. You can almost imagine the building if it was fronting on Main Street, but just happens through circumstances to have to be set back. Both the Pietro site and potentially even the veterinary site may redevelop over time that might create more connections through the site. But we're trying to take advantage and make the best urban building and the best building for Milwaukee that we can within the constraints of the flag lot. So one of the things that we did is we designed the building so that the upper stories of the building are in sort of the shape of the letter H, with the open sides of the H, one side facing west to Main Street and the Willamette River, and the other side facing east toward the residential zone. What this allowed us to do is really break down the mass of the building, so we didn't have any long building facades on any one side of the building. It also allows us to have courtyards on the second level of the building, on level 2 on the west side, which you see here, as well as the east side facing the residential zone. Those courtyards then allow us to have kind of occupied both private and common areas that are raised up above the street looking out toward the river. But also we wanted to design a very active frontage on the building that faces Main Street. The main access to the building is through the right-of-way on, call it the flag pole or the flag lot. And in the center of the building, there are 2 live-work units that have access and face Main Street and have access from the flagpole and the pedestrian access and vehicular access to the building. To the right of your screen at the base is the lobby of the building and all the amenity spaces. So the lobby and amenities face both Main Street and also face south to the pond below that. We're using very high quality materials, brick primarily along the entire base of the building. The upper stories of the building, we're using an extremely high quality Hardy Reveal 2 system, which is a very thick fiber cement panel that doesn't warp, that has integral color. We also have bay windows and balconies. And we've utilized what I'd call almost a traditional apartment building, mixed use building design with a tripartite division of base, middle, and top that is also a guideline that's repeated both in the Milwaukee downtown design guidelines as well as many of the standards as well. Next slide, Maria. This is a view at a little bit more oblique angle. This is looking from the southwest of the building. So when you turn, you can actually see as you're moving up and down Main Street, the deep recesses in the building for the two courtyards on either side. So again, this is the west-facing courtyard you're seeing now that has a common rooftop terrace on it. Then there's some private terraces on another setback. What we're really trying to do is break up the masses into components and into smaller, humane scaled building elements instead of one large kind of box of a building. You can see the tripart building design, and you're also now seeing the south side of the building that is facing not only the pond, which is private property just to the south of us, but also Scott Park, a public open space further south. That's where all of our main building amenities are. There's also multiple private spaces for balconies, and we do have a overhanging terrace that caps the composition, or cornice that caps the building design, that also is part of the Milwaukee downtown design guidelines as well as the standards. Next slide. And then this is the view of the south side of the building that is facing the pond. So this entire frontage, with the exception of two residential units on the right side of the screen, actually are on the ground floor and overlook the pond and have their own private terraces. Otherwise, the amenity spaces include the lobby. There's a fitness room, common room. All those common spaces within the building spill out through doors and extensive glazing to go out to some outdoor terraces that are in the vegetated corridor zone, with then the landscape buffer up against the pond. The other thing you'll notice, actually, if you can go back on this one elevation, is that there are setbacks required, step downs to the R5 zone to the east side of the building. So we have been complying with all the step downs. What the step downs do is they mitigate the scale of the building next to the R5 zone. They're very prescribed in the Milwaukee standards, and we've complied with all those standards. But the other thing that they do is they also provide places for roof terraces and outdoor spaces. So all of our roofs are all occupied by either common roof terraces or residential terraces. So we're really trying to activate all sides of the building, even including the tops of the roof. This is the east side of the building. It's actually designed in the same very similar character as the west side of the building. We don't have a rendering of this side, but it also includes that deep recessed courtyard, as well as on the left side of the screen next to the R5 zone. You can begin to see some of those step downs that I was talking about. This side of the building does not have any public access ways to it. There are some open metal grills to the parking structure that have some kind of decorative security grills in front of them that allow fresh air into the parking garage. You also can see that there's a garage door on the right side of the screen, as well as a door for residents to get in and out of the building. That door is the only way that parking lot in the northeast corner can be accessed, because we are not allowed to have vehicular access into that parking lot from 23rd right away. Next slide. And then this is a section through the building that shows, this is a section looking south. So the ground floor of the building which includes the live workspaces. This is kind of cut right through the center of the building. We have live work residential units that face Main Street and are connected to the vehicular and pedestrian access down the flagpole. The rest of the ground floor in this portion is all structured parking. So we're trying to minimize the amount of surface parking and maximize the amount of structured parking on site. And we have a close to a 1-to-1 parking ratio. We also have mechanical parking. We also used mechanical parking in the Axle Tree project that has been working out very successfully in downtown Milwaukee. This shows you the deep setbacks where we have the 2 courtyards, as well as the stepping down to the R5 zone in the distance of the building behind the section. Next slide. The floor plans of the building, I can go into in more detail if you would like, but I think Brett gave a pretty good overview. So on the ground floor, we have live work units facing Main Street, and then all of our lobby, fitness room, lounge spaces, amenity spaces face the pond to the south, although there are 2 residential units in the southeast corner of the building also facing the pond. Above that ground floor podium, the building turns into that kind of rotated H shape that creates the outdoor terraces on both sides. Primarily to the west is where our large common roof terrace is, along with an amenity room that faces the Willamette River and Main Street. So that whole courtyard is going to be extremely active, full of people, full of landscaping, and looking down and helping to activate Main Street. We also have private outdoor open space that you can always see in blue on other terraces as the building steps up, plus balconies that are projecting off the building. The southeast corner of the building falls away as it grows through the building to create that stepping down to the R5 zone. And then finally, the roof plan, we only actually have 2 mechanical units on our roof. They both will be screened to meet City of Milwaukee standards. Next slide. So we wanted to show you just kind of the conceptual outdoor amenity space programming that we were doing outside the amenity spaces on the south side of the building on our current terrace. So both the fitness room and lounge spill out onto this terrace that overlooks the pond. We have been hoping to have that terrace be wide enough that we actually could have everything from outdoor games, outdoor fire pit and sitting areas, a barbecue grill, and also some flexible space for outdoor fitness activities like yoga or outdoor exercise. This is how it was designed before we heard from the city's consultant that was recommending that we actually reduce the size of that terrace and kind of pull it back so it would be approximately 17 feet across the entire frontage of those amenity spaces. If the Planning Commission agrees, we can accept that, but we would prefer to keep the terrace the size that it is, just so we actually can have room for these outdoor activities on that terrace. So that would be our preference, but we'll abide by your decision. But we just wanted to make that request. Next slide. Actually, let's skip over the parking, unless we can always come back to that if there's more questions later. The only other thing that we wanted to mention is we really appreciated all the comments from the DLC committee, and thank them for their recommendation of approval. They did have some recommendations that were mentioned at the beginning of this presentation by Brett. So a couple of the things that they suggested, many of these we are incorporating. There's a couple that we're not planning on incorporating, and I wanted to run these by you. They did request potentially a recommendation for a canopy kind of over our parking garage entry that enters into the building. We actually have upgraded the garage doors that are visible down the pole portion of the lot to what's called a vertical lift gate garage door. So you can see the picture on the right. When that garage door opens, each layer of the garage door lift vertically, and they're actually probably the most high-end garage door you can use. They're not just your typical coil lift garage doors that are not attractive. It will be all steel and painted to match the same color as all the mullions on the building. But we think we don't need to actually have the canopy over the garage door, that the garage door has enough architectural quality inherently in itself. But that's something that we'll leave up to the Planning Commission to make your final call on. There was also a request or a suggestion that we add a exterior canopy to one of the residential units in the southeast corner. We talked about this to Brett. I would say we, both staff and us as the applicant, don't think that an additional canopy is necessary on that residential unit because that's not a main entry into the residential unit. The main entry is internal to the building. There is doors out to a terrace, but the main entry to that residential unit is internal to the building. So we don't think a canopy is absolutely necessary there. Other than that, we have also provided some of the additional exterior material detailing that they requested, and so that's being sent to Brett. They also asked for a conceptual idea of what the metal grills look like on the back side of the building. So we've actually shown a picture of that. That is the decorative metal grill that covers up the openings on the east side of the building, and again, only on the east side of the building. The east side of the building is not visible, nor does it have any public or any walkways at all next to it. That side of the building is heavily screened by a landscaping from the residents to the side of it. We were thinking that we would do some plantings of potentially some vine plantings that could actually grow up those grills, but it does need to be open to the air so we can provide natural ventilation into the parking garage. We have worked with Brett, and all of our rooftop HVAC units are fully screened now. That wasn't clear at the DLC hearing. And finally, they actually asked about documenting the existing Kellogg Bowl buildings and interior memorabilia. So Polished Commercial has actually had access to the Kellogg Bowl, and they have actually salvaged quite a bit of historic memorabilia, as well as bowling pins and even wood from some of the bowling lanes. And their interior designers are planning to incorporate a lot of that memorabilia and artifacts into the building interior common spaces, and particularly in the lobby and some of the ground floor amenities. So we definitely agree with the DLC on that. So next slide, please. I think I'm going to hand it back to you, Maria.
Yes, thank you, Kurt. So this slide shows our proposed perimeter landscaping along the eastern facade. We did get a caller earlier who owns property on the other side of the building. So this shows you that we have a very extensive landscaping screening plan. This picture here shows the hedge at Waxleaf Privet. That's a really dense shrub with very thick vegetation that's commonly used for privacy screening. In addition to the hedge, we have some aspen trees spaced along the property line, which grow to about 10 feet wide and 30 feet tall at maturity. And we have a couple of other tree species planted at the parking lot, which are more appropriate for their function in this area. As was noted earlier, one of the challenges on this property is the developmental constraints associated with the natural resource overlay zone. The city map shows two areas on the project site with the overlay. We actually did have a wetland biologist conduct field delineation, and the survey showed that the natural resource boundary associated with the stream to the north of the site is entirely off-site. It does not overlay the project site or the limit of work on 23rd Avenue. So we're not impacting this, not encroaching this buffer in any way. The southern portion of the site is adjacent to the pond on the neighboring property. This is an artificially created pond, but it does have a vegetative buffer that extends onto the project site and requires natural resource review. This slide shows the existing condition. As Brett mentioned, the property is entirely developed. It was paved about 60 years ago and has been used as a parking lot ever since. There is no vegetation present anywhere on the site, no natural resources within the boundary. It's all hard pavement. This picture shows the southern property line. There's actually a retaining wall separating the pond from our property and a fence on top of it. The pond is about 5 feet below the grade of this site. And because of this retaining wall, the vegetated corridor on site cannot really function the way that a typical upland buffer would, because there's no vegetated slope or waterfront, but instead a hard physical barrier. But again, the code requirements still treat it as if it was a continuous space. So in order to accommodate our building, our project, and the required parking and required open space for the project, we are requiring an encroachment into this buffer. But the project does provide an improvement over the existing condition and several benefits to the pond ecosystem. We are planning to remove the existing pavement and provide a 10-foot wide planting area along the southern edge of the property along the pond. And the planting area will consist of native species, native trees and shrubs. The plant species and spacing were designed to serve an ecological function, but also to work well with the retaining wall, so as not to compromise the structural integrity long-term of the wall, because they do have to be planted directly on top of it. Overall, the proposed landscape strip is a net benefit to the project, and it contains approximately 1,800 square feet of native vegetation. The buffer will provide shade functions to the pond. It will improve the microclimate over the water's edge and provide a source of organic materials for the pond. So widening the landscape buffer any deeper into the project would not actually result in an increased environmental benefit, again, due to that retaining wall and the separation, because they function completely separate from each other. Now I will go over the variances that the project must request due to its shape and location. Again, as mentioned earlier, it may seem like the project is requesting a lot of different exceptions to the code, but they're all related to really the flag lot shape of the property and the fact that it doesn't have frontage on Main Street. I really want to emphasize that we're not trying to cut corners or not to meet the development code requirements. This is a legal property that exists, but the code does not contemplate this geometric oddity. So the variances are necessary if you were to build any project on this site. Maximum setback variance is necessary because the code allows only 10-foot maximum setback on Main Street. The main buildable portion of the lot, you can see, is about 260 feet back from Main Street. The pole portion of the lot is only 55 feet wide, and it's constrained by an easement. All of this area shown in kind of lavender color on the exhibit is constrained by the required access drive that has to meet the fire code for its width. The 5-foot wide sidewalk to the building, and here we have some fire utilities for the building, so that area cannot be developed with the building. So absolute minimum setback that we can have on this project is 260 feet back from Main Street. Frontage occupancy variance, the code requires that 50% of the site frontage along Main Street is occupied by a building. Again, it's not possible here because we have to provide the sidewalk and the driveway, so we cannot put a building on this portion of the lot. Off-street parking is not allowed by code between Main Street and the building. For the same reasons, really, again, if we take out the area that's required for the driveway and the sidewalk, all we have left is only 20 feet of space remaining, and really the only economical use for this area is parking. It's also important for this specific project to have some unassigned open parking in front of the building instead of the garage, because it does have a leasing office. We do have visitors, Uber deliveries, drop-off spaces. They need to be able to use this area. And also there is an easement for the benefit of the vet clinic that shares parking on the site. And finally, open space variance. Again, it's related to the frontage and setback requirement. In this case, we cannot meet the 50% requirement because 68% is already constrained by the easement. But we are meeting the code requirement to the extent possible. We are providing a publicly accessible plaza here at the corner at the project entry along Main Street sidewalk. The area is approximately 950 square feet in size. This is just kind of a large level conceptual design, but it is planned to have some landscaping, a nice shaded sitting area, some pedestrian pavers just to soften the area a little bit and define the edge of the project. In conclusion, I just like to highlight the benefits that the project is providing to downtown Milwaukee. It's fully consistent with the City of Milwaukee comprehensive plan and implements the goals of downtown mixed-use zoning district. As Brett mentioned, residential building is allowed in the zone by right. The project provides 178 units of needed housing, the need for which is clearly demonstrated in the Milwaukee Housing Needs Analysis Report. The residential project brings desired density to the area and creates customer base for the retail and for the commercial center, downtown Milwaukee. Really, every great downtown district with thriving retail and thriving commercial has really successful residential neighborhoods that support it. Because successful retail and commercial really cannot survive without a residential density. The design of the building demonstrates distinct urban character. It's really well articulated. It uses high quality architectural materials. And the project will provide desirable public spaces, including over 12,000 square feet of usable outdoor space. And finally, the project is designed and is projected to earn Earth Advantage Green Building certification. Our team is really proud of this project, and we firmly believe that this is the right kind of development in the right place that the city needs. We'd like to thank you for your consideration, and we are open to answer any of the questions right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that very thorough presentation. I appreciate the attention to detail there. Laura, the script doesn't read it this way, but I believe now is the time for commissioners to ask questions, if there are any, to the applicant. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's what I thought. I just want to double check. So with that in mind, commissioners, are there any who have questions? And if you can physically raise your hand, I'll scroll through. I see Commissioner Kostrobati. I see your hand raised. You want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Chair Elizabeth. I appreciate it. Thank you to our visitors today for this very thorough presentation. I do also appreciate you mentioning the housing need that our city currently faces. However, what was missing is that in order to fulfill the need, there needs to be affordability. So my question is, what are the rents looking like for this complex?
Yeah, Chair, would now be the appropriate time to respond to that as the questions come in, or would you like everyone to ask questions and then we respond?
No, please respond, but as you do, again, your name and city of residence be helpful.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Zachary Pyle. I'm a development manager with Polish Commercial. I reside in Vancouver, Washington. Thank you, Commissioner, for your question. This project is not a designated affordable project. So we wouldn't meet any of the criteria outright for, some sort of affordable credit, whether that be or designation. The rents will be market rate, which are changing rapidly. I think as anyone who follows the market understands, COVID has kind of sent rents on a roller coaster. So I don't want to project rents right now, but they would be market rate. Not luxury. We do hope to make this attainable to normal folks, and that's the plan. But that's kind of the simple answer right now.
So what's attainable in the company's perspective?
In the company's perspective, attainable would be the market. So we're not going above and beyond what a typical apartment complex of this size. The average price per square foot is driven by a market study that's of comparable projects.
Okay. Another question is, with the pond being there, how does the company plan to protect that pond to make sure that it's not, it doesn't become a trash basin for tenants to throw their trash in?
John Morse with AKS could speak more to our stormwater control plan, which I think is also a big component of protecting the pond. As far as protecting the pond from becoming trash, certainly the site will be more well monitored and more active. Our leasing agents and leasing lobby will be on the ground floor, very close to that. There's full views out onto the site, so we would expect and in fact maintain that our residents weren't trashing the site. I think additionally you'll see just increased eyes on the street and therefore security around the site. I know Mr. Sharon was one of the public commenters, was concerned about security of his private property, which is adjacent to ours, and we'll definitely work with him on ensuring that his gate and his property is properly fenced. But I would just say, in addition to that, you're going to see with this active project just kind of an increased community security.
Okay. I have more questions, but I don't know. I don't want to take up all the time here, so I'll stop right there. Hopefully I can get back to you.
No, Commissioner Kostrobati, now would be the time if you do, but I, again, want to remind everybody here to stick to the applicable criteria for which we're reviewing the content of this presentation.
Then the only other question, because I had some questions about, solar and charging stations for the vehicles that are parked. Is that going to be, can I ask that question?
I'm happy to answer it, because we're really proud that the project will have a solar component on the roof. Essentially, we're looking to offset kind of our common area electrical use and feedback into the grid where the opportunity arises. Additionally, we'll be providing some electrical charging spaces. I believe it's 10 to start off with, but we're installing infrastructure to be able to greatly expand that as demand arises. So kind of trying to future-proof our electric vehicle parking capabilities. So we're really proud of that.
Zach, commissioners, that is not part of the applicable criteria. So again, just want to focus on what is applicable, though we do appreciate those details, Zachary. Other commissioners, and I'm kind of scanning here to see if your hand is physically raised. Commissioner Kocher-Buddy, I think did we cover everything? Just give me a nod if you're good. Yes, okay, thank you, thumbs up. Okay, Commissioner Edge, go ahead, please.
So I'm just trying to understand kind of what the project loses if we require the expanded buffer on the south property line to protect within the water quality buffer. So that was one of the conditions that was recommended by staff, was to expand that from 10 feet to maybe 16 feet in order to provide that 1-to-1 ratio of impact to mitigation area. And so I'm just wondering, what does the project lose if we require that as a condition?
Maria, would you like to take that one, or would you like me to start off?
Well, I brought up the slide here that shows the planned uses for the patio. We would have to cut it to be about 17 feet deep, which is about the size of a parking lot, parking space. So we won't be able to accommodate all the furnishings and the outdoor fireplace and kind of areas for the residents to hang out outside and do some activities. If we were to provide the square footage that's requested of us, we may potentially go on the kind of, let me find a good site plan. On the back of the building, if we want to preserve the terrace, we can plant some additional native landscaping here at the back, which is actually a good area because there's no walkway. It's very quiet. It's just the back of the parking garage. And we can, I don't know if we can take it offline and discuss it with Brett or the city's consultant, but that would be our preferred location to replace the turf here with native plantings.
Yeah, Commissioner Edge, to follow up on that, I think it really just becomes, from our perspective, a desirable place to be for our tenants. It just becomes lessened. I think it decreases the enjoyment that the residents could get out of the pond, because it really kind of becomes a little claustrophobic, a little bit of a walkway, and just really dead space because we can't fit any furniture out there. There's not a whole lot of room for exercising or for us to set up furniture. So I think it's more substantial than just the 6 additional feet that the city is proposing, because you do shrink down to less than the depth of a parking space, and that's really just a corridor. Right. So that's kind of the driving factor for our desire to maintain this with as much, hardscape as possible.
Sure. So then with the stormwater plan, I was looking over the stormwater plan, and I just wasn't seeing where the basin is that might outflow to the pond. Is there a stormwater basin that outflows to the pond?
This is John Morse with AKS Engineering in Tualatin. I'm the civil engineer for the project, and none of the stormwater will outfall into the pond. It all gets routed to a public stormwater system that's closed conduit pipe. And it'll all be treated per Milwaukee standards prior to discharging into that system. So, there won't be anything going in there.
Okay, and so maybe this isn't entirely relevant to that, but is there the opportunity for using like permeable pavers or some other type of hardscape surface there that kind of balances what we're trying to do in that space with what you're trying to do in that space?
I think that I'm not sure who you're suggesting what we're trying to do in that, or what the city is trying to do. I think what the code is trying to do is preserve, natural habitat and buffer. And Brett, please correct me if I'm wrong, but permeable pavers aren't ideal on this project for a couple of reasons. One, we've got really shallow groundwater, evidenced by the nearby ponds, so they don't really work for infiltration like you would want them to during those high groundwater seasons. And additionally, they still don't provide, I think, the ecological benefit or that kind of buffer benefit that the code is really trying to get at. But Brett, please jump in if I'm misinterpreting.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I think I'd agree actually that part of what the spirit of, well, I think both the spirit of the regulation and the spirit of the recommended condition was to strive for more actual vegetated planting. And I think it's a great suggestion, in terms of trying to be creative and figure out if there's some workarounds. But yeah, I think for the reasons Zach mentioned, that probably if all we could get was just some pervious paving there, I deferred, I guess, Stacy on the applicant team to, in terms of, confirm, her, John, confirming the stormwater issue. But yeah, I think simply getting pervious paving there isn't getting kind of as far as the code would like to get in terms of actual vegetation.
Okay, and then my next question was just to kind of circle back. I had the same question for Brett, and what were the reasons for your decision making around the not dedicating the flagpole as a public street?
I think Brett mentioned some of them. From our perspective, as Brett surmised, the parking is desirable to be able to control what that looks like. Additionally, it does allow us to maintain that space up to our standards. If the city were to ever lose funding for any reason to maintain public streets, we would be able to maintain a nice entryway to ours. And John can speak a little more to this last point, which is that we're utilizing a lot of that underground space for some of our on-site utilities, including the stormwater system that he was just mentioning. John, do you want to go into that at all?
Yeah, that is correct. We have quite a bit of utility in that area, and one of those items is a subsurface detention pipe. That's where we'll be detaining all of our stormwater before it discharges, or at least a portion of our stormwater before it discharges to the existing pipe system.
Okay, great. Thanks for answering my questions.
Are there other commissioners who have comment or question? Just scanning here. Commissioner Sherman, I see your hand up.
Great, thanks, Chair Losfeld. Maybe following up a little bit on Commissioner Edge's question in terms of kind of what you would have to lose or gain on the terrace and staff suggestion on that. We've also received some public comment talking about pedestrian connectivity across the site. And that was part of the conversation that we kind of had earlier. And, when you look at our transportation system plan, we have a lot of existing policy around connectivity and promoting pedestrian environments. And as part of the approval criteria on the zoning map amendment, one of the criteria is providing adequate public transportation facilities. So I just wanted to maybe ask the question, because I do think the public asked the question in some of their written testimony around whether or not you as the applicant would be willing to provide some sort of easement across the property for public access, pedestrian access.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, and I appreciate, I think it was Daniel's question regarding the public access easement, and we aren't willing to provide that. There's a couple of reasons, but the primary one is that's it's not a typical precedent and would kind of be an encumbrance upon the property, just from a ownership standpoint. I think Brett summed it up well, that there's informal access and it kind of functionally works as a public easement, but we would be able to enforce people moving off the property and keep them from loitering, which I think is really important to residents, especially when you are so close to that downtown area. You need to be able to monitor your site and keep it clear.
Thanks.
All right, I'm gonna see if there's anybody else. And if you're raising your hand and I'm not seeing you, shout. I think we are ready to move on. Appreciate the applicant again for the detailed presentation and sticking with us for questions from the commissioners. I'm going to go into the next portion of this, which is specific to testimony from our other attendees. First, we're going to listen to those speaking in support of the application. And I'm going to ask Vice Chair Edge to help me keep time. Just a reminder to those, this is your opportunity to speak. We ask you keep your comments to 3 minutes. You'll be given a warning. I think we agreed at 10 seconds. Is that right, Commissioner Edge? Prior to finishing up your comments. Mary, are there
30 seconds or 10 seconds?
30 seconds. We'll do 30 and then go from there. Mary and Brett, can you tell me if there are any attendees who are raising their hands, wishing to speak in support tonight? Give you just
we do have a hand raised,
okay.
But I'm not sure if it's for support or not. So if it is for support, please keep it up. If not, please take it down. Okay, that's what I thought. So no, we don't have any raised hands for support at the moment.
Okay, I will then move on. If you have any anybody who is looking to testify in opposition, now is your opportunity.
Got one right now, Rod Smith. I will move you to speak. You should be able to unmute yourself when you can.
All right, Rod, welcome to the meeting, the discussion here. Again, state your full name and city of residence, and then we'll begin the timer for 3 minutes. Please be concise. Rod, we cannot hear you if you're speaking at this time.
Hello?
There we go.
Hi, yes. I noticed that the gated community that you've created here.
Can you just state your first and last and city of residence? Sorry, it's a matter of process here.
Oh, of course. My name is Rod Smith. I live around 620 feet from the back from the back of the property. I live in the city of Milwaukee. I've noticed that you have a gate on the north side around, and you've privatized the pond area for only the new residents. It also seems that this is now a gated community in the city of Milwaukee. I really can't see you actually getting that. I have no idea how you reached this point. Honestly, I have been trying to keep notes, but it seems that this is majorly a problem. And you've literally said that no one's going to be allowed to use the easement.
We need affordable housing, not gentrified housing.
Yes, we do need affordable housing here. And what you've done is you've literally isolated everyone away from it. There are people I know that I have had potluck dinners with directly behind this site that are just stunned that you would decide to place a fence up to keep us out of what is downtown Milwaukee. And I still don't understand how those bicyclists are going to use and utilize the street directly behind them. I mean, you want to make this accessible to the train and the bus stop, but you have a bus stop in front, and the train is literally going to be almost a quarter mile longer in distance from where you want to make this new site. 178 units on a possible liquefaction zone is dangerous on top of everything else. I mean, you have two water sources on both sides. The liquefaction zone sits at a 0.5, and the apartment I live in right now could literally collapse that building. And I'm stunned that this has even been considered and have reached this level. I do want to say thank you very much for your time, but I'm completely flabbergasted that this has reached this level without having some sort of action. And I would love to see a person of color on this entire panel. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Rod. I'm going to suggest, Zachary, are you still with us? Or Kurt, maybe you would like to take that. There's a lot to unpack there, but who'd like to take the lead on this?
Can I just, sorry, Chair Lisfeld, I think my understanding was that right now would be a time for if any commissioners have questions for the testimony, the person who's testifying, now's the time to ask. The applicant will have a chance to rebut any of the comments coming up.
Apologies. Questions from the commissioners? I'm seeing none.
I'm sorry, Chair. Could you verify with the participants that they realize that we are going to be closing their opportunity to be able to speak? Just one more time, please.
Yes, thank you, Rod. I appreciate your time. We're going to be moving on if there are no questions from commissioners specifically to Rod. I'm going to move on to the next. Is there any questions for Rod? No. All right, Mary and Brett, could you allow the next?
I'm not seeing any other raised hands. If you want to testify, please do raise your hand so then we know. But as of right now, I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, give you a last minute here just to raise your hand. If you're on the phone, it's *9 if you'd like to raise your hand, but otherwise we'll be moving on to neutral testimony. All right, do we have anyone who wishes to offer neutral testimony?
Chair Losfeld, I have a question for staff, if I may, before we move. Is that, oh, sorry, never mind. I'm reading my thing wrong. Apologies.
Okay. Brett and Mary, anyone raising their hand for neutral? Looks like no.
No hands raised at this time.
All right. Any member of the Planning Commission have any questions regarding testimony at this point? Commissioner Huebner, I see your hand raised.
So I think this falls within the applicant and the city, and so I'm a little confused on this 23rd connection. So when I look at the site plan, I see at that north corner that there's a little patch of dirt that maybe we could get a bicycle through, but then I guess that leads to access to the Oddfellows, which and if it's city-owned property to the north of that, is there opportunity to have the city put in a path, or is it not typical to put a path to connect something onto private property? Or can you just kind of talk through that a little bit or explain that to me?
I'd like to ask the city attorney to address this one. If he can find his mute button.
Could you repeat the question, please, Commissioner Huebner?
Is it odd to have public access onto private property off of 23rd? Because there seems to be a little bit of a landscaping feature on 23rd that if you wanted to connect it into the what I call the Oddfellows parking lot, is it odd to have public access dump onto private property without an agreement? Or even that the city owns a property to the north where they could maybe put in a path? Is there some sort of rule or an agreement that has to come to, or?
Oh, I don't know that there's a rule. I guess I'm not sure I 100% understand your question, whether it's odd to not have public access onto private property. No, it's not.
I'm sorry. So it's a bicycle connection from 23rd, which would be a street, right, that would end and allow a bicycle and pedestrian connection that would go into the backside of Oddfellows, which is kind of the same condition that exists now, except, right, people go into Kellogg. The way that this is designed, of course, you can't really get that easement so much, except for maybe taking a little bit of that corner up at the top to grant that easement. I'm just wondering if there is.
There's no legal requirement that the applicant provide a public access to his property. So yeah, I'm not sure what easement you're talking about. There's not an existing easement.
I understand. I understand. Okay. There's not an existing easement. What I'm asking is, does it make it illegal to make an easement onto somebody else's property that is not present here tonight to make a discussion?
Well, an easement's a legal document. So I don't know the Oddfellows lot. I don't know if there's an existing access easement. Perhaps Brett has some information on that. I'm not quite certain. We can't declare an easement. That's a legal document and a legal property interest.
Oh, okay. That's good enough, I think, to answer my question.
An easement gets memorialized in a document that outlines the reasons for the easement, the legal rights to it. It can be very, very specific. And in this instance, it's my understanding, I believe on the site we're addressing today, there is no existing public easement. And I don't know about the neighboring site for the Oddfellows.
Okay, that's good enough. And then my second question is that does the code require a gate, or are removable ballards a standard that can be used instead of a gate?
I would defer to the city engineer, whom I don't believe is still here with us. I know in other instances we have gone the ballard route before, but I'm not actually certain what the requirements would be from the different organizations that are requiring the access.
Steve Adams, the city engineer's battery died, so he's working to come back on. But
would the applicant be willing to look at removable ballards instead of a gate system in that back?
Is it okay to answer some of these questions at this moment, Lauren?
I believe so.
So right now, the only thing that is gated and fenced is the surface parking lot in the northeast corner off of 23rd Avenue, and primarily the reason that the parking lot is gated and secured is just that residents need to have secure parking. And particularly women who are parking back there, they need secure parking to getting back into the building. But that is the only thing that is gated or fenced. So it was actually my understanding that the city of Milwaukee did not want vehicles going down 23rd Avenue to our property, and were open to the idea of installing bollards on 23rd to keep vehicles from going all the way to the end. But the applicant, Polish, is not planning on gating anything else on the property. So even though they're not granting an easement, they don't actually have a problem with pedestrians going from 23rd along the northern walkway and connecting back down to the pole, the flag pole to get to Main Street. But they just object to the easement, the technical language of an easement, which encumbers the property. And they do want the ability to be able to at least maintain security on their property if someone is on their property that is causing problems. But we are not, this isn't the only thing that is gated is the one secure parking lot. Nothing else is gated.
No, I understand that. And so that was my question. If the gate for the applicant's purposes is to provide security and protection from 23 to that parking lot, that's one thing. But as it was presented that it needed to be movable for emergency services, and in the past we have used ballards. So My question was that if the applicant was open to using ballards there instead of that gate?
Yeah, I think for security reasons to the parking lot, we would prefer not to do that, just to maintain security for the residents who are parking in that lot.
Okay, thank you.
And then I imagine that emergency services would have access code or otherwise be able to enter in the gate if that was necessary. That's a code.
That is correct. Yeah, the sliding gate is for emergency access only. That's right.
Okay, other commissioners, just physically raise your hand so I can. Commissioner Sherman?
Thank you. Brett, I just had a clarifying question based on Mr. Rod Smith's testimony. Wanted to just clarify, there is currently no public access to the pond. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that is because the Kellogg Bowl property has no public access across it.
Correct.
Actually, the pond is private property as well.
Okay.
Right. At least that portion of it that's adjacent to the site.
That's correct.
Great. Thank you.
Other commissioners, please raise your hand. Now's your opportunity. I'm seeing no hands raised, so I'm going to move on. Commissioner Edge has gone off mute.
Who are we asking questions of right now?
This is generally
kind of procedurally lost track.
But yeah, this is just generally speaking regarding any testimony to this point. We're at the end of all testimony, and this is your opportunity to ask the question.
Okay, so I guess I just if for Brett, I'm just still trying to understand kind of that south end, like what the Natural Resources Code is trying to do and how that really works with the pond the way that it's set up now. And it sounds like I don't want to get into deliberations. I don't think I'm deliberating with this. I think I'm clarifying. The objective of the code is, to provide more vegetation, which I understand, but it's still kind of disconnected from that water feature. And, and normally that kind of vegetation is I understand there's a wildlife movement element, which is kind of, problematic with the grade difference, in the retaining wall. The next thing would be, water filtration and cleaning water as it flows, into the natural system or, into the waterways. They're flowing out to, the city's stormwater system. So it just sounds like there's a lot of disconnect between the buffer area that we're really looking at, versus how it functions and how it really interacts with the water quality resource that we're buffering. And so I'm just trying to make sure I understand kind of what the city's, recommended position is here in light of, kind of the testimony of the applicant. And is there any change from your recommendation from before at this point based on their feedback?
Sure. Thank you. Great question. And I think what I want to do is I'm going to address that question. And I think, Lauren, I'm not sure, somewhere in the script, what I was hoping to do is as part of the end of the neutral testimony to have staff have one final shot to say anything we'd like to say about maybe kind of in responding to any of the public testimony or what the applicant had presented so far. And I think the applicant is then going to get a final chance for rebuttal, or additional comments. And I think questions to staff or the applicant during either of those times, I think is appropriate. So that is one of the points I wanted to address, Joseph. So I'll start there. I think that ideally what the water quality resource rules and that vegetated corridor are trying to do is to provide more of a buffer between protected water features and development and other activities. I think that part of what I did working with our consultants report was move forward that basic idea that a standard approach to mitigation is one-to-one for mitigation based on disturbance. What I've heard a little bit, because everything kind of came together with not a lot of time. I didn't give the applicant a lot of time to have more conversation about this item. So what I have heard and what I was kind of hoping for was a little bit more information, maybe a different way to think about kind of what you're getting at. Think about the resource itself, the quality of the resource. And I think, frankly, you have a chance to try to weigh the value of, again, some of the question you were getting at, what is the nature of that outdoor plaza space that's being proposed, juxtaposed with the quality of the protected water feature. And I think the commission, because of the discretionary nature of this review, I think the commission is in a position to be able to decide, for example, if you think it's more important to have more of that outdoor amenity space for the tenants, then I think you could, we could pull some language into the findings based on some of what the applicant has offered tonight, which is a little bit more of a comment about the quality or nature of the resource. Reminding us that there's a separation of a retaining wall from the pond, that it's not, we're not dealing with a typical kind of top of bank situation, including, because everything is so contained and going into piped stormwater systems, and that stormwater infiltration for the site itself will be going into its own system largely. I think that if the commission wanted to, you have the room, I think, and Justin can confirm, and Laura, you can back this up, I guess, if we disagree. I think that you could say, you could direct staff to adjust the findings to say that, something to the nature of, given the quality and type of the resource, that what the applicant has proposed, which is providing some vegetated buffer, some shade for that portion of the pond, but due to limitations of the resource itself, it's kind of very controlled artificial type nature, that you could find that the proposed mitigation, even though it's less than 1-to-1, is adequate, given the conditions, I guess, of the resource. I think you have the room to do that. And maybe the applicant could offer a little bit more, if they have more suggestion or more information to help with that finding. So does that kind of get at what you're asking about that?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
If I could say a couple more things, just as part of like staff kind of, not I wouldn't say rebuttal, but just kind of response to things we've heard since. I think Commissioner Edge, or Vice Chair Edge, I did recall the thing I forgot before that I wanted to say when you were asking about access and connectivity, and that is it helps to make or push for connections when we have some of this information in our transportation system plan, or TSP. That's one more place that we can point to and say, hey, we've looked at this and we thought that it'd be really good to get some kind of connection through the site. We don't have that in our TSP right now, for whatever that's worth. And so that kind of goes along with what the applicant's already addressed and what we've talked about already. And I think, Commissioner Hemer, you're trying to get at this a little bit too. Is there any opportunity to get some kind of public connection, a formal public connection through the site? And Justin can correct me. I think, again, short of the applicant volunteering to do that, there's nothing in the approval criteria for any of these applications that get us there. And I think what I've understood the applicant to express is, like it kind of functions today, there is tacitly condoned, informal public access through the site, that it sounds like the applicant is willing to tolerate, to put it one way, as long as there aren't security or other kinds of problems. That the reason that they've, to restate what they've said, is they would like to continue to maintain the control that has been exerted over the site through today, which is you are technically trespassing if you're not, a resident, or in this, someone going to bowl at the Kellogg Bowl. It sounds like people have been able to pass through the site, and as long as they're not creating problems, the applicant would like to retain the ability to deal with security and deal with problems. So it sounds like that's, that it's not really a situation of formally gating off the entire site, preventing access, but technically the applicant wants to and has the right, I think, to preserve that ability. I meant to say earlier that with respect to any questions you might have about the design review, meeting. We do have a Design and Landmarks Committee or DLC member here in the meeting who's available to answer any questions about the DLC's recommendations. Brett Lorela is available. I'm sorry I didn't say that earlier. So if you have questions about anything that the DLC recommended, you can ask, and if he's expressed willingness to pop in and answer them. Yeah, and I think
I would like to ask Brett a couple questions when he's available.
We'll promote him in as part of this. Yeah, and I guess the last thing I guess I would say is just another small correction to kind of reiterate what I think has already been stated, and that's just with respect to be clear about the natural resource review and where there was and was not vegetated corridor on the site. The city's maps initially showed that there might be a small portion of vegetated corridor touching that northeast parking area. When the applicant provided more detailed plans showing contours and actually locating the top of bank, it became clear that there was no, that wasn't even an issue for the northeast portion of the site, simply for the south. So I think that's all I'd have to say right now, but I invite you to ask Brett Lorela any questions that you might have about the DLC's recommendations.
Yeah, if he's available, I'd be happy to. Okay, so one of the recommendations from the DLC was to extend that canopy cover from the main entryway across the garage entry, and the applicant, explained, why they would prefer not to consider that. I would like to give, Brett from the DLC the opportunity to really explain the purpose behind that guideline and what their rationale was for making that recommendation. And then I have a follow-up question about another design element as well.
Well, I think it's a great question. I think that the intent behind that comment was, if you look down the panhandle from Main Street towards the building, there's not a clear identifier of the main entry to the building. I mean, you look right down to the garage door, and I think our intent was to, in a minor way, use that canopy as an identifier for a porte cochere or something like that, that gives pedestrians and vehicular traffic a means of identifying where the entry is, because the actual entry is to the right of the vehicular entry. And we didn't see I saw it tonight, the new entry door, which looks beautiful, but it's not, that doesn't facilitate the idea of extending the canopy to create a more visual connection to what is the entry of the building, whether it be via pedestrian or vehicular.
Okay, thanks for that explanation, Brett. And then the follow-up question was, I thought there was a reference to a canopy over a recessed entry on the southeast corner, or where was that? Was that one of the live-work units, or was that one of the residential units that on the southeast corner? But the applicant had another, same explanation, was that they didn't think it was necessary to put that design treatment there. And so I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak about why you recommended that, and whether you think that their explanation is sufficient.
Right. The recommendation there was because there are canopies that are on other parts of the building where the architectural elements of the building have canopies. Even though it's not an entry, it's a door specifically to that unit, and it provided some symmetry to the canopies in the building. That's, as I recalled, I think Brett might be able to bring up our discussion on that, but I think that was the intent of that was to create some symmetry in the canopies over that south, I guess that would be the southeast corner of one of the units.
Yeah, if I may, I think part of the note from the DLC, and the recommendation to consider or to look at that again, I think one of the questions that had come up was something that I needed to look at the code, which was, is it actually technically required to have a canopy over the entrance there. And the conclusion that I came to was that if you were simply trying to meet the standard for weather protection, you would need to do that. But the applicant had already kind of gotten off into not quite meeting the standard for weather protection. And so my conclusion was that opened the door to this more discretionary look. And the applicant could propose, well, for whatever reasons, we don't think it's necessary or isn't required. So the question of whether it could be required, like as a condition, I thought I settled as part of the discretionary review.
So it's your the city's position that we can't really condition these recommendations as requirements then?
I actually don't think it would be that much of a stretch for that particular one. If you revise the finding to somehow say that in terms of meeting the purpose statement for that element, it's to provide an all-weather pedestrian environment. So I think part of where it starts to maybe be a little bit of a stretch is, Kurt was indicating that the primary access to that unit is from the inside. And so if you're trying to make the case and make the finding that you need to require a canopy there to provide this all-weather pedestrian environment, would have to really tie back to like you see, because you would expect people to be entering kind of in a pedestrian way from the outside. That seemed like that might start to be a little bit of a stretch. And maybe when the applicant has their rebuttal chance, they can maybe speak a little bit more about that. But that's where I ended up on that.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to ask Brett those questions and for both of your answers to those. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. Before we get away from the staff portion, I also want to note, it looks like Steve Adams has been able to get back into the conversation. So Steve, if you want to say anything in response to, anything, but especially Commissioner Hemer's questions about bollards versus the gate at 23rd, now would be a chance maybe to address that.
Okay, I'll have to respectfully ask Commissioner to restate his question, as I was on battery power. My computer died. It took me a few minutes to get back in. Sorry.
So my question was, does the city have designated standards between for access to fire and emergency vehicles, the difference between a gate, a ballard, removable ballard, those kind of ideas?
I think a gate is quicker. A gate, you have a single lock and the entire 25 plus feet opens up. With bollards, you have to space them so many feet apart to keep cars from sneaking by. And so you have to unlock several bollards. So on something like this, I think both the fire department and public works would prefer a gate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I want to move on if we can, assuming that there's no more questions. I also want to reference where we're at in the evening. It's about 9:40. So we'll need at some point a discussion about extending the meeting. This is the appropriate time to ask, now that we moved on from Planning Commission, questions regarding staff or testimony. An opportunity for the applicant for rebuttal. Does the applicant have any rebuttal or additional comments in response to the public testimony? If not, we will close the public testimony and move on. And I just want to remind you, just be concise with your comments.
Hi, yeah, this is Stacy Reed. I'm the senior biologist at AKS. I reside in White Salmon, Washington, and I just wanted to provide a little bit of an additional clarity on the vegetated corridor. So it's my understanding the intent of the code is to provide a functional lift. And so as Maria pointed out in her presentation, currently there's really zero function as existing conditions on the site. The fact that there's a retaining wall, the area has been paved as the parking lot for over 60 years. And so by removing the pavement and adding in vegetation closest to the pond with some trees and some overhang, it actually will provide a significant functional lift. And really going beyond that, because it's severed from the pond, which is an artificial feature, doesn't have any documented native fish in it, doesn't provide a significant benefit. I think the amenities that the public would gain from using that space versus requiring an additional 6 feet of plantings isn't going to provide that significant functional lift that the code's trying to achieve for that portion. And the other thing I just wanted to mention too is there's actually no set mitigation ratios. There's no 1-to-1. It's just a functional lift on the site, which I do think the site plan meets.
I appreciate that feedback. Would that be the end of any rebuttal comments? Others from the team? I'm seeing nobody raising their hand or mentioning Kurt saying no. Okay. Again, thank you to the entire design team representing the application. At this point, I want to close the public testimony for DR-2021-003 Kellogg Bowl redevelopment. At this point, I just want to ask commissioners, first of all, let's just take care of where we're at in the evening at 9:42. I will take a motion to extend to 10 o'clock.
We don't have to move to, I mean, we would have to extend past 10 o'clock to need to take the motion.
Correct, sorry.
So I'll move that we can extend the meeting till 10:15. That should give us enough headroom.
It's been moved, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been seconded, so we will extend to 10:15 for this discussion. So commissioners, this is our opportunity to discuss. Who wants to begin?
Okay.
Commissioner Edge.
I've spent a lot of time reviewing this and looking over the findings and the conditions, and I think staff has done a great job really using the latitude that we have, and the discretion that we have to really put forward what I think is the best version of this proposal that we could see. I've really been debating, with myself over the natural resources part, and I do actually. This may sound weird to some of you, but I do concur with the natural resources biologist who just spoke a minute ago that we really this is a trade-off between an imperfect natural resources situation and the opportunity to provide amenities to the tenants. And I really think that as proposed with the 10-foot buffer, and the recreational terrace that they described, this does a better job, I think, of actually putting people into contact with the nature that they're putting in there, rather than adding in some additional, vegetative buffer and then moving people away from it entirely. I think this is an opportunity on this site to, which is, they're really filling the site out quite a bit. And so there's not a whole lot of opportunities for a connection with nature. And I think that is it's a compromise I'm willing to accept, to have that be a recreational area and also have that buffer there. And so I would be willing to vote to approve tonight with the modified findings to accept the recreational terrace as an appropriate trade-off for the buffer strip, and to leave that at a 10-foot buffer strip as proposed by the applicant. There's a lot of other ground that we could cover, in talking about this, but I think the key things are there's no public easement across the site. Any informal access that's been in place is not part of our approval criteria. It's not up to the applicant to satisfy an informal access, informal use. In fact, it's probably a liability for them. So, I understand where they're coming from, and I also appreciate the neighbors being concerned about losing access to a resource they've been able to enjoy. But owners change and things change. So, might be a tough pill to swallow, but I think that we're kind of stuck with that. And then the other element is that I just wanted to touch on really quick is, this is not a capital A affordable housing project, and there's no legal requirement that it be. There's nothing that says that they need to provide affordable units. This is fully within, the standards. This is, that are allowed. Market rate housing, an increase in the supply of market rate housing will have an impact on the demand, and will help absorb some of that demand and hopefully have a reducing pressure on prices. So, this is not really something that we get to consider. This is allowed and they're within the code, I think, and all the variances that they had to provide are because of that weird flag lot shape that we don't have to deal with in other sites in downtown. So I think this is really the best, possible option, that they could have put forward, and I'm ready to approve it.
Okay, are there other commissioners who would like to comment? Commissioner Hemer?
I just want to say there are a lot of things I like about this project. One, I appreciate a developer and a builder using a 1-to-1 ratio on parking. I appreciate that they figured out that extra space and that they're using the maximization of their space. A lot of times we see variants trying to come in to reduce their parking, and which causes more of a burden on those downtown areas to try to figure out their parking. So I do appreciate that. I also appreciate the difference of sizes of the apartments in this. I mean, the nice thing is that, yeah, maybe the 2-bedroom, 2 baths may not be affordable for everybody, but the open studio or the 1-bedroom certainly can be affordable. And it's a really nice mix where you can collect a variety of economic levels to live together. I understand the concerns about the access, and the more that I understand it, it probably will live the same as long as there isn't a problem. Or the first couple of trees right off of 23rd, there'll be a dirt path that goes into there and it falls off into the Oddfellows Lodge there. So there is a lot to appreciate about this project. I certainly I agree with Commissioner Edge that, hey, that the 2,600 square foot patio should probably stay. That makes as much logical sense as it does to cut it back to that 100 by 17 feet or what was being suggested by staff. So I don't, we just accept the project as proposed and not add in the extra suggestion by staff, I think, or when we vote on this. So yeah, I like it, just like it.
Thank you, Commissioner Hemer. Are there other commissioners who'd like to make a comment? Really, nobody? You're all tired, I think. Okay, well, with that in mind, I'll just throw in my 2 cents. I also appreciated the detail and depth of conversation we were able to get to here. I also made note of the mixture of units and appreciated that. I was really happy to see the thoroughness of this presentation so that we could get and check a number of the boxes in terms of the approvable criteria. And again, thank you to Brett and to staff for providing that detailed length of their discussion, and just feel like this is a very strong project. I'm ready to approve. I'm looking and seeing no other hands raised, so I'm also entertaining a motion at this point. Who would like to take a stab at that?
May I ask a clarifying question of staff or Commissioner Edge, who's probably read through all of the findings of the fine-tooth comb, just to make sure that when we approve the land use, that variance of the 2,600 square foot patio is not in there, or did you already write it into the findings?
It's already in here.
Okay, so do we have the line item that we can eliminate?
If I may, if you well, let me try to share my screen again and show. I can show you two documents where I will show you what I would take the commission's. I'll share this one direction for. Let me see.
It's like finding 7E.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or wait.
Oh, I'm not seeing it on our screen.
Are you seeing it?
We are.
You are? Okay. Can you see this? I've got a like a 3-page PDF here where I've captured a couple of pages where I suggested there might be some changes to make. This one captures what I had originally proposed to change. This is in, yes, I think it is finding 7F, I think.
Yes.
And this is what I was proposing to go along with the condition. But here, I would take the commission's direction to revise this language to essentially say that, something to the effect of what Stacy Reed from the applicant team said. I would revise this to include language that says, the proposed mitigation provides an adequate functional lift for the protected water feature. And essentially suggest no additional mitigation is required besides what they're proposing, and keep that there. That would mean, if I can try to drag one other thing over, can you see this Word document?
Yep.
Yes. This is from the conditions.
Yeah.
And I've just highlighted what I would change. In condition 1C, I still want to refer to finding 7, which is where the natural resource review is, but I would strike out the language about expanding the planting area and simply keep the language about there was a need actually to slightly increase or to have the applicant look at increasing the number of plantings just to make sure they met the spacing requirements for the area that they would plant. So it would be this condition 1C and finding 7F where I would make those adjustments in addition to the finding I mentioned. This is in, I think, finding 12C, where I would just strike some language that previously said something about senior housing development, in addition to adding the comments, including the 2 new ones that aren't on this list. Those are the staff changes that I would propose taking your direction.
So are those sufficiently read into the record for us to fashion a motion around a reference to that?
Justin, could they say, or do we changes as proposed by the commission or as suggested by the commission? Is that good enough?
It depends how detailed. I mean, I think I want to make sure we all have a clear idea about what it is. So if we get through that through reference, or we get through that by doing it word by word, I'm agnostic about which pathway we take, but I want to make sure that it's clear.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. I move that we vote to approve master file DR-2021-003 with the findings and conditions of approval as amended by the commission in this hearing, which includes finding 7F being modified to not refer to expanding the width to 16.5 feet, striking that sentence. And then condition, 1C, to also remove language referring to the expanded buffer strip. And to remove a reference to a senior housing development.
A second.
It's been seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Raise your hand. All those opposed? Nay. I see one hand raised for no. All right. So with that, we have approval. And to mention that if anyone wishes to appeal the decision to City Council, you must make application stating the grounds for your appeal within 15 days of mailing of the notice of decision. Please see planning staff for details. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the discussion here. Moving on then to the next item on the agenda, which is other business. So do commissioners or staff have other business updates?
I do.
Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, so we're having a special meeting on August 5th, and we're going to do that all via Zoom. It's not going to be broadcast. So that was just to let everybody know, but then we will play it on YouTube later. So that's for this special meeting, which brings me to the conversation that I wanted to bring up with you all, is that the City Council has now moved into doing a hybrid for their meetings. We have that option. We have the option for some of you to be in City Hall and some of you not to be in City Hall. It's kind of, I believe staff will be there in case anyone from the public would like to testify in person. People can also continue to testify on Zoom. There's both options that are available. And then the Planning Commission can talk about whether or not, I know that there's been some discussion about not everybody wanting to be in City Hall, and I think we can do a hybrid. So I thought I would just open that up to you all for a brief discussion to kind of get a feel for who might be coming into City Hall and who might be attending on Zoom.
So Laura, that's from 6:30 to 8:30, is that right?
On August 5th?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not going to do the hybrid on the 5th, just to be clear. We're going to do we have the hybrid option on the August 10th. Sorry, thank you for the clarification.
Well, okay, let's tackle this one at a time then. Okay, and that is 6:30 to 9 on the 10th is what I have. I actually have two meetings. One goes till 10 o'clock. So is there anybody who on August 10th is interested in meeting in person at City Hall? Commissioner Hamer? Anyone else? Just show of raise of hand.
I would, but I don't think I'll be able to attend that meeting period.
I'm missing that meeting as well.
I personally will not be able to make that meeting, Laura. So that's three of us.
Okay.
Just so you're aware.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else who won't be able to attend, period, you just raise your hand. Okay, so it sounds like Commissioner Hamer can attend in person, is interested in attending in person. So to the discussion about generally speaking, holding a hybrid meetings from here out, I know that we've had a lot conversation about this. I'm in support of maintaining hybrid virtual options just for public attendance, and also to have greater variety in our commissioners to provide for folks who just have it, are able to function from home and may have interest in becoming a commissioner in the future if that was accessible to them. So are there other comments or anything anybody wants to add to this? Support of hybrid? Maybe there's a raise of hand here forward. Support of hybrid. Laura, I don't know if you want to talk about if there's do you want to have a certain minimum number of commissioners physically in person, or does it not matter, or what do you?
I don't think that there's a set number that we need to have. I guess I think that we can try it out. If Commissioner Hamer is going to be there in person, but the other commissioners are not going to be, we can see how that works out. We might want to flip that at some point. I think it's kind of a work in progress. We can see what works best for the commission and for the public and kind of decide where we want to go from there, because there's not any set rules about that right now.
Yeah, and having watched the city council meeting, they're all huddled around this speaker, and so I think it'd be hard for us seven to huddle around this speaker. So to make this thing work, I and let the work in progress, because I do truly believe that there's got to be some better way to make this happen. But I will leave that to the City of Milwaukee IT department to figure out.
Are you saying there's just an AV challenge here, that we need more microphones?
No, I think what happens is the delay in the Zoom versus the live causes an issue. And so the speaker, I think, eliminates that problem, if I understand that correctly.
Scott was working with our audiovisual folks on that exact problem. I will say that the speaker itself is very sensitive, so you don't need to sit close to it. I think the problem was trying to fit, there was an older system plugged into a newer system, so they're trying to figure out what needs to happen to get rid of that echo. So our hope is that gets taken care of.
Brett, is that the microphone that Mary just pointed to that you're speaking to?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's very clear.
And I'm speaking away from it for whatever that's worth, just as Mary did. She spoke towards the screen. So.
We tested it for the council meeting, and you could be across the room and still hear just fine. There was just a plug-in problem with something, and they were trying to solve it the other day, and perhaps they did. I just don't know.
Okay, well, Laura, does that answer your questions then?
Yes, I believe it does. So we'll just prepare to have whichever commissioners decide to come to the meeting on August 10th, and they can come to City Hall or you can be at home, and we'll send directions on how to navigate that prior to the meeting.
Maybe in the future, when we're sending out emails about attendance for future meetings, folks could indicate whether they are planning to be in person.
That's a good idea.
I do think it would be nice to have a commissioner at the dais, just for community members who physically come in. I think there's just an element there of being in person is desirable. Okay, any other business?
Not from me.
Right.
I'll do one quick commercial, since the majority of you are going to miss the August 10th deal, and we're not going to be on TV for August 5th. So for some of you that came down and enjoyed our July 10th Juggle Mania, August 14th, we are having another program at Milwaukee Museum from 1:30 to 3:30. It is called A Little Bit Off. Go to the Milwaukee Museum Facebook site and sign on up for the event. We had over 120 people for the two shows last time. Free snow cones from Two Sisters Play Cafe with a little pinwheel. This time there might be bubbles with your little coupon for the free snow cone. So bring down the kids, bring down your grandparents. It's fun for everybody. So that is Saturday, August 14th. 1:30 is the show and 3:30 is the show. The museum will be open so that you can smile and learn something all in one day.
Thank you. Any other items for discussion? Okay, let's do our future forecasts.
Again, we've got our special meeting on August 5th. Then we also, and that's Thursday, August 5th. It's not the normal time. We're trying to fit in that extra meeting. And then we have our next meeting on August 10th, looking at comprehensive plan implementation. And then there's the same on August 24th. Again, it's more comprehensive plan implementation, work sessions, getting ready for hearing. And then on September 14th, we have the Bonaventure Senior Living Walkways variance, which right now is tentative. And that's all for the forecast for the moment.
All right. I will take a motion for adjourning our meeting. I should really.
I move we adjourn.
Have a motion.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. We'll adjourn tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Thank you all.